Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku seduced Momo with his beast Quirk? Part 1. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Izuku thought he didn't have a quirk from the beginning. He and his mother were even told by the doctors that he lacked a quirk. They were mistaken. Miss Hinjo's 5B cat was lost one day when she was 10 years old and in the apartment building's entranceway. As a good neighbor, Izuku took up the cat and petted it, which caused him to experience an odd tingling feeling. Izuku returned it, focused on the weird sensations, and in an instant he transformed into a perfect replica of Miss Hinjo's cat. As a result, he discovered that he indeed had a peculiarity. An unimpressive one in his mind. 5 years later, Izuku was sitting in the park nearby where he usually is. Years ago, he had found the place beneath a big oak tree, and the seclusion helped him decompress. It wasn't functioning today. Kachan had said the obvious an hour ago. That there was no value in Deku's oddity. With a broad smile, Kachan remarked, "So what? You can turn into any animal. What are you going to do if you become a hero, turn into a dog, and piss on a criminal's leg?" His two friends chuckled at the remark. Izuku was devastated when the three departed. He had to acknowledge that during the previous 5 years, he had come into contact with a number of different creatures. Kachan was right. The worst thing was that his clothing did not change with him when he did transform into an animal. So he must have been nude. Yes, he had the ability to transform into other animals. Still, what kind of hero would he be? He covered his face with his fists as tears pricked his eyes. He had aspired to be a hero ever since he watched All Might on television. That dream was but a daydream now. Izuku mumbled sorrowfully, "Worthless, utterly worthless. Finding your real power." As she left the scientific research library, Momo Yaoyorozu carried a number of checked-out books. She looked at her watch and grinned. She still had 3 hours left, and she had requested that the chauffeur return in 5. Therefore, she went to her favorite location in the park, which was directly across the street. A large oak tree stood on a little hill. She could study there without being approached by any jerk. Almost every day she was approached by lads and young men who wanted to ask her out, either inside the library or at the picnic tables in the park. She was aware of the reason, which had nothing to do with her passion for science. No, they were primarily drawn to her because of her attractive body and well-proportioned chest. With the books pressed to her chest, she made her way to the isolated location. Few people were aware of the location beneath the tree, and Momo was just a few feet from the tree's trunk. One of those that did caught her eye. She had previously seen the green-haired boy, and they would typically ignore one another while she sat on the other side. It was essentially the spot's code or regulation. She took a seat across from the boy and started her first book, adamant about completing enough research to be prepared to enroll at UA in about a month. Then a melancholy murmur reached her ears. She also heard sobbing as she said, "Worthless, utterly worthless." With a sorrowful tone, the youngster responded, "That is just what I am." She stood and walked around the tree to see the green-haired guy crying because it hurt her heart. The boy jumped a little when Momo inquired, "Are you all right?" He looked up at her after removing his hands from his eyes. He massaged his eyes after blinking. He wasn't certain what he saw was real. He saw a girl who was the most gorgeous thing he had ever seen. "I did not mean to startle you. I just heard you and I thought maybe I can help somehow," she replied. He finally blinked and took a sharp breath. With a shaky breath, Izuku stammered, "I am okay." Momo gave a headshake. She knew he wasn't feeling well. There was a serious problem. Trying a new strategy, she held out her hand and said, "My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. I have seen you here before. Usually I keep to the unspoken rule of not disturbing those here, but you sounded upset," Momo said as Izuku nodded. Momo knew it was not true, but Izuku said, "Yes, I have seen you here too. I am Izuku Midoriya, and it is really nothing." She waited with her arms folded across her chest, grinning at him from below. She could nearly identify with his final statement, "Like I said, it is not really anything. It is just my quirk is worthless, so I cannot become a hero like All Might." Her quirk would not be very helpful as a hero, according to others. She was resolved to disprove them all, though, particularly after receiving a recommendation to UA. He appeared impressed, but then he scowled when Momo told him, "What is your quirk?" "Mine is creation. I can create anything if I know the operational or molecular structure of an item." Her eyes widened as Izuku explained, all I can do is change into any animal that I have touched. Even ones that I touched years ago. Then she grinned widely. Momo replied inquisitively, who said that your quirk is worthless? That seems like a very wonderful ability to have. Izuku actually grinned a little as he said, show me please. He then nodded. He transformed into a tiny black and white cat in front of her, and it slipped out of his clothing, which were now lying on the ground. Its green eyes, which Izuku also has, gazed up at her. Izuku's meowing voice was almost understandable as he murmured, "Yussssee not rr really I am impressive." Momo put her hands together in a clap. As the cat purred and Momo giggled, she said to him, so you can talk even as a cat. That is impressive. She covered her mouth with her palm to keep from laughing too much. Wishing to avoid offending him. He was exactly the kind of boy she had been searching for, and she was starting to like him. Can you change into anything else but a cute little kitty cat? He then transformed into a huge Saint Bernard dog, a golden retriever, and a canary, every typical animal. However, she always saw that the emerald green eyes of the animals were the same. She shook her head when he growled and yelled, wow, so it is any animal you have touched. He agreed and then took a look at his attire before asking, can you go back to being normal? Izuku asked in a snarling, barking voice, could you turn around? Right now, I'm naked. Momo felt her cheeks start to get warm. He tapped her shoulder as she turned around and heard a rustle of clothing being put on. Momo grinned and shook her head, saying, okay, I am decent now. That is one of the drawbacks, my clothes do not stay on when I turn into an animal. Momo said to him, I'm sorry, but I think your quirk is fantastic, and whoever told you that you couldn't use it to be a hero is a fool. Then she had an idea. He shrugged as she said, say is it any animal that you touch? Maybe one that is extinct. Izuku said, I do not know. Momo took his hand and guided him down the little slope. Her chauffeur-driven car waited below. Momo, intrigued that she liked holding his hand, replied, let's go see. She had met other boys, but he was different. He didn't stare at her and try to flatter her, for starters. No, he was. In fact, she discovered that she enjoyed his uniqueness. She essentially shoved Izuku into the back seat and told the chauffeur, Shinji take us to the Central Natural Museum. She climbed in behind him without letting go of his hand. When she simply grabbed his hand and dragged him swiftly down the hill, he was in complete disbelief. He was even more shocked when she held his hand as the fancy automobile raced away. He could hardly talk because he was so shocked. To ask her why they were visiting a museum and why she was being driven about by a chauffeur. As the car drove up in front of the big building, she told him, I have an idea and the best way to see if it works is to experiment. She clutched his hand as she got out. She had now, however, entwined her fingers with his. Izuku felt as though he was about to pass out because his heart was racing so fiercely in his chest. In an attempt to win Momo over, the other boy would insult and denigrate Kacchan if he was there. Given how gorgeous Momo was, that was just the way Kacchan was. She guided him into the prehistoric exhibits of the museum. He understood. As they came to a halt in front of the petrified bones of a dinosaur, Izuku remarked, wait, I am not sure about this. I do not think it would even work. It was identified as Velociraptor mongoliensis on the sign in front of it. He read the sign's other words as well. The dromaeosaurid theropod dinosaurs of the genus Velociraptor lived in the latter Cretaceous period, between 75 and 71 million years ago. Izuku took a breath and turned to face Momo. Momo pointed at the dinosaur's 7-foot skeleton and said, try it, what have you got to lose? Izuku moved closer, reluctantly reaching over the barrier ropes. Tentatively and lightly touching the bones. Then promptly retreated from the display. With regret, she released his hand. With an audible exhale, she advised, okay, see if you can change into it. He concentrated on shifting, and he discovered that he had transformed into a velociraptor with the sound of tearing fabric. With a swallow, Momo fixed him with wide, terrified eyes. The vicious dinosaur had all the features and appearance of a real velociraptor that she had seen in the Jurassic Park films. It was molted green and brown, with big, dangerously sharp teeth. Izuku, she murmured, her voice brimming with concern that he had changed. Izuku growled, and Momo swallowed visibly. Well, it worked. He hissed, I guess ISS should change back. Momo nodded rapidly. Momo grinned and glanced around, saying, problem I am now naked. Stepping behind a column and avoiding Izuku, she made sure no one could see her. She lifted her blouse to reveal a red t-shirt and a pair of blue knee-high shorts. A pair of saddles followed, putting them behind one of the information desks after returning. Izuku stood behind the desk and went back to being human, nodding more like he was bobbing his saurian head. Putting the clothing on, then flinched. With a little smirk, he said, "You forgot the underwear." Momo laughed. Momo smiled widely and said, "Sorry, but the only underwear I know how to create is girls' panties. I do not suppose you want to wear a thong." Izuku laughed briefly. Izuku said, "No thanks, I rather go commando." Momo took his hand again and interlaced her fingers with his. His voice was low as he continued, Momo, you do not have to hold my hand. I am not going to wander off." Momo smiled wryly and squeezed his hand, saying, "I know, I just like holding it." Which caused him to feel a rush of excitement. Maybe she did like him, I thought, hoping. They went on to the next one, but Izuku didn't change this time, thinking they couldn't morph into a brontosaurus while they were at the museum because it was too large. The same is true of the Triceratops and Stegosaurus or the Tyrannosaurus rex. A man in a white coat raced up to them, panting, as they were making their way to an exit. The man stuck out his wrinkled hand and said, "Excuse me. I am Dean Henderson, the lead professor of paleontology." He was wheezing now, and his eyes appeared to be wide with joy. "I just saw you change into a Velociraptor mongoliensis in the monitor camera room. Is that your quirk? You can change into dinosaurs," he said. Izuku nodded slowly. "Oh, this is amazing. Young man, please change into some of the others. We don't have any chances to see a real one," Momo said, glancing beyond the animated elderly man to observe other people in lab coats coming. Izuku said, "Professor Henderson, not in here, sir. It may become really confined for me changing into any of the others. This is Momo Yaoyorozu, and my name is Izuku Midoriya." The older man led the way, followed by the 5 other people in lab coats, 2 of whom were carrying cameras and 1 of whom was carrying a black satchel bag. Along the way, Izuku picked up a nearby sheet that was covering a console, and Henderson gave him a strange look. "Pleased to meet you both, and oh, of course." Henderson grinned as he surveyed the exhibit room. "The back parking area is empty right now. Is it okay if I borrow this?" Izuku stated, "I can't keep having Momo Yaoyorozu keep making me clothes to wear." Henderson shrugged his shoulders, and Momo grinned while holding his hand, seeing that the others appeared to accept her accompanying them. Izuku wrapped the sheet around himself and took off the sandals, shorts, and t-shirt before throwing them in a heap on a nearby bench. "They must think we are a couple or something," Momo thought, not really interested in disputing or verifying that. As he moved farther away, Izuku told the assembled paleontologists, "If I transformed with those on, I would have nothing to wear when I turn back to human. So which one do you want to see first?" All of the white-coated men and women started yelling names when he inquired. Izuku nodded as Momo said, "Go for the Tyrannosaurus rex." He then transformed into a 20 or 30-foot T-Rex, bending down to observe the others. Some of them retreated, not liking the big fangs in a larger mouth that was now a few feet away. "Whoa!" Henderson looked up at Izuku and gasped, saying, "Hey, look, that is incredible." He took a weary stride closer and said, "Who would have thought that the T-Rex was a dark green with brown stripes? He's not going to eat us, is he?" Momo grinned and shook her head as the elderly man carefully looked at her. "Izuku, you aren't correct." The enormous dinosaur moved its head in her direction and opened its wide mouth when Momo asked it a question. "No." As Momo began to laugh, a loud, growling voice said, "This is so cool." Hearing a T-Rex talk wasn't funny, but the way the people in the white coats kept stumbling backwards was. Henderson, who was trembling with excitement, couldn't take his eyes off the Izuku T-Rex's long teeth, so he finally plucked up the courage to approach. "Is it possible for us to obtain a few skin samples?" Henderson told Izuku, "All we do is rub this cloth and some of the loose scales will shed off." He held up a white cloth in his trembling, anxious hand, and Izuku nodded, inspiring the others to begin taking measurements and photos of him in his T-Rex form. 10 minutes later, they had him transform into another dinosaur, and then another 10 minutes after that. An hour later, after Henderson expressed his gratitude, Izuku and Momo left the museum, and she took his hand once more. "Want a ride back to the park or another location?" As they got closer to her car, Momo questioned, and Izuku shook his head. Izuku pointed to the west and told her, "No, that is all right, I live over that way about 4 blocks. The park was farther south and at least 15 blocks away, and if it accepted the ride back to the park, he would have to walk home from there. Thank you so much, I never thought about if I could change into anything like dinosaurs before. He said with a big smile on his face, wishing he didn't have to say goodbye to her. He liked her, and who wouldn't? She was smart, beautiful, and really nice. He knew he had no chance of being anything with her, but it was nice to have that little delusional wish. Hey, no worries, that was enjoyable. Those in there were really funny to watch. Momo pointed to the museum, then turned back to face Izuku's stunning green eyes. She let out a breath and said, I was thinking, maybe it might be a good idea to practice changing into those dinosaurs. She looked at the waiting car and said, you know my house has a huge backyard, plenty of room. She was shocked to see that she was nervous as she spoke, and then she felt a drop of perspiration on her forehead. No guts, no glory. Momo blurted out, grinned broadly, and nodded right away. Izuku said, yes, I would like that. Momo hurriedly took out a piece of paper, wrote down her address and phone number, and handed it to him. She then handed him a blank piece of paper so he could write down his phone number as well. Now that they were standing there, unsure of what to do or say, Momo was having a hard time saying goodbye because she enjoyed spending time with him and holding his hand. Before she lost her nerve, she jutted forward and kissed his right cheek before letting go of his hand and jumping in the back seat of the car. Momo said, see you tomorrow then. Izuku touched the exact spot on his cheek where she had just kissed him, and a big smile came on his face as he stared at her. She smiled, closed the door, and the car drove away, and she found it charming that he was standing there looking confused. She gave me a kiss. When Momo's car drove out of sight, Izuku finally stated, she kissed me. Does that imply that she likes me? He wanted to question his mother, so he stumbled out and walked home in a stupor. He sat at the kitchen table in his and his mother's apartment, looking at him with the same puzzled look on his face. His mother, Inko Midoriya, looked at him bewilderedly. Inko sat down and said, you seem a little pleased this evening. When she waved her hand in front of her son's face, he finally blinked. Izuku grinned widely and murmured, she kissed me on the cheek. Inko was now genuinely interested. Who gave you a cheek kiss? With a little smile, Inko inquired, eager for specifics. Izuku responded in the same stunned tone, Momo Yaoyorozu. Inko drew nearer and started asking him pointed questions, saying, oh, she is someone that I met today at the oak tree. He said, she is amazing, intelligent, and really gorgeous. Inko grinned, eager to meet this Momo, primarily to see how she could so easily confuse her son. So, will you see her once more? When Inko asked her kid, he nodded rapidly and grinned with dazzling eyes. Izuku held up the piece of paper and said, yes, tomorrow at her place. She was about to ask him more when his phone rang and he answered it. He smiled, and Inko knew it was this Momo. Her son got up and went to his room to speak to her privately, and Inko laughed when the door closed. As she got up to prepare dinner, Inko exclaimed with joy, my son has a girlfriend. In his room, he and Momo talked for hours, mostly about what they had done today. Then to her delight they began to talk about each other. About who they basically were. She had not informed her parents yet that Izuku was coming tomorrow and she needed to. So after a bit, they said goodbye for now and agreed that Izuku would come to her house about noon. Going downstairs, Momo braced herself. Her father had definite ideas about what boys or young men that he wanted her to be interested in. A nobody like Izuku was not even in consideration. But she found those that her father wanted her to be with romantically were not the type that she liked. For one, all they cared about was money, that and the possibility of getting into her pants. The last one, she had to create pepper spray and threaten to spray the idiot if he tried to grope her ass again. That did not set well with her father when he informed him about it after. His belief was that Momo had overreacted. Stepping into the living room, she saw him ready the latest stock reports from the newspaper. Her mother was casually flipping through a magazine. When she entered, her mother smiled at her. Ah Momo, where have you been all day? Her father, Tachanaka, looked up from the newspaper with interest, so Momo told them everything. Her mother, Ashimomo, asked, still grinning, and Momo suspected that her mother already knew everything about the boy she had dated earlier. Her father, however, was a different story. In other words, he is essentially a city nobody. Toshinoki Hoski is a great boy. What is so wrong with him? There was a lot wrong with Toshinoki, But the main issue was that he was a complete asshole, believing like his father that a woman should only stay at home, take care of the house, and raise children. Momo wanted to be a hero, not a domestic housewife. Her father said, "His father Tanaka is one of my closest business partners." He was hoping to persuade his daughter to forget some nobody and perhaps see the merit of someone with a solid financial future. Her mother continued to smile and remarked, "Oh Tachanaka, she is years away from even considering marriage or settling down. This Izuku Midoriya sounds like a really nice boy." She said, "Of course you can have him come by tomorrow." She waved her right hand flamboyantly and looked at her husband with the same small smile, essentially daring him to contradict her. Momo's father was too smart to do that, so he flipped his newspaper and continued reading it. Momo thanked her mother and went back upstairs, where she needed to find the ideal outfit for tomorrow. She wanted to look just right for when Izuku came for a visit, but she was having trouble finding an outfit that would impress him without being too obvious. After all, she wanted him to build a possible friendship. She wasn't quite sure what she had in mind, but she knew she liked him and would at least want him as a friend, perhaps a little more as time went on. Izuku was lying on his bed, unable to fall asleep, and all he could think about was how Momo Yaoyorozu had kissed him on the cheek. His mother had refused to help, explaining that it might indicate that she liked him as a friend or something else, and that it had been a while since she had remembered the reasons why a teenage girl would do certain things. He stared at his room ceiling as he started to review what his mother had said. "Okay, if she hits me playfully that means she likes me, likes me, likes me. However, it can also indicate that she simply likes me. Another option is if she proposes that we go out and do something together that is just the two of us. Then it might be regarded as a date. However, it may not always be. It all depends on how she acts." Shaking his head, he was now not even sure that she even liked him. It was all confusing. The one thing he did know for certainty was girls were weird. Other thoughts came to him. She had kissed him on the cheek and told him she liked holding his hand. That had to mean something. Shaking his head, he found himself feeling really tired, and as he drifted off to sleep, he was tempted to ask any deity that would listen to help him have something with Momo. Even friendship would be okay. Awakening early, Izuku headed for the bathroom. His intention was to thoroughly wash himself. Make sure that he was completely clean. He even tried shaving, which in itself was not easy. First he had trouble with the shaving cream. Filling his hand, he did not know how much to use. So he emptied the can. With a heaping amount in his left hand, he began to spread it on his face, accidentally putting a good amount up his nose and even some in his mouth. Sneezing white shaving cream onto the mirror, he spit out the foul-tasting cream in his mouth. After spitting several more times, he was now ready to shave. Picking up the plastic Bic disposable razor, Izuku winced as he removed the plastic cover. Running it under hot water, he carefully began to shave. Thankfully he did not cut himself, wondering why it seemed not to really do anything. With a shrug he finished shaving and cleaned the razor. Then noticed that there was no blade in it. Looking down at the yellow plastic cover, he saw the metal shaving blade stuck in the plastic. "Fuck it," he stated with slight frustration, not wanting to try again. Actually he couldn't. He did not have any shaving cream left. Washing off the remnants of the shaving cream, he picked up a bottle of Aqua Velva shaving lotion. Pouring half the bottle in his hand, applying it to his face. Next he brushed his teeth and gargled mouthwash. The last step to his grooming was applying a good amount of deodorant. Leaving the bathroom to put on a pair of blue jeans and a black long-sleeve t-shirt. His mother's suggestion. Stepping out of his bedroom, he saw his mother making breakfast. She turned towards him and then waved her hand in front of her face. "Whoa, what did you do in aftershave when you took a bath?" Inko commented as she continued to wave her hand, trying to fan the smell away. "When it comes to aftershave and cologne, less is best," she advised, and he immediately washed his face. Then applied just a few drops. Much better. She glanced at the clock and noticed that he had 2 more hours before he needed to catch the train. Momo's address indicated that she lived about 40 minutes away by train, 15 minutes by car and 6 hours on foot. So it would take him about an hour and a half to get there by train. She was tempted to borrow Mrs. Orikosaka's car and drive him herself, but decided Izuku needed to have the time it would take to get there to sort of calm down. A nice long train ride would provide that. She kept breakfast light, suspecting anything heavy and Izuku would end up throwing it up sooner or later. A nervous stomach did not need something heavy like pancakes. Nope, the best thing was toast with butter and jam, along with some fruit. After breakfast, Izuku began to pace the floors and basically started to drive Inko crazy. He would pace in one direction, glance at the clock, then pace back. Turn and repeat the process. Finally she had enough. Why don't you go early? He excitedly walked out the door, headed for the train station 2 blocks away, where he waited for the westbound train to arrive. Inko implied that he wanted him to depart before he paced the floor. The home of Yaoyorozu. Slapping the snooze button on her alarm clock, Momo Yaoyorozu pulled the blankets over her head. She was many things, but a morning person she was not. She could go to bed at 8 p.m. and still would have problems getting up at 8 a.m. 9 minutes later the alarm went off. This time she produced a hammer and smashed the alarm clock. Wincing as she realized what she had done. Sitting up, she ran her hand through her now disheveled hair. With a bit of reluctance, she got up, brushing the remnants of the clock into the nearby trash can. Pulling another out of a drawer. I have to stop doing that, Momo mumbled as she plugged in the clock and set the time. Yawning widely, she stretched and headed for the nearby bathroom. Staring at herself in the mirror she frowned. Geez, I look like I was hit by a tornado, she commented, her hair sticking up in all different directions. Removing her pajamas, she turned on the shower. It took at least 10 minutes before her hair was no longer a mess. Washing it thoroughly and adding a good amount of conditioner. Shaving her legs and trimming her area. Not that she expected to do anything with Izuku that required her to shave. But it had become a weekly routine that she did on Saturdays. Back in front of the mirror she spent another 20 minutes on her hair. It took a lot of finesse and hair gel to get it to be the way she liked it. Once done, she moved back to the bedroom wrapped in a towel. Inside she felt a little impatient and nervous. Izuku was coming in about 3 hours and she was really looking forward to seeing him. Really hoping that her father would behave himself. It took her 2 hours to reselect an appropriate outfit. Deciding upon a pair of tight blue jean shorts that hung down to her knees and a white V-neck short-sleeved t-shirt. Wanting to show off some cleavage. After all, she was given her well-endowed chest and she intended to flaunt it. When the gate bell rang, she bolted from her room, not wanting her father or mother to be the first to greet Izuku Midoriya. Shit, he is early, she stated, running down the 3 flights of stairs. Izuku arrived at the address on the paper and gazed at the magnificent gate, the enormous mansion, and the expansive yards. Oh man, Izuku said. A house and backyard, she said. Izuku exhaled and pressed the call button slowly, hoping that maybe he was in the wrong place and that Momo wasn't this wealthy. Then he had the thought that maybe Momo's parents were employed by the owners and lived here to be on call all day and night. However, when Momo's voice came over the intercom telling him to come on in, he had the overwhelming urge to just turn around and leave, but then he saw Momo Yaoyorozu, who was smiling and waving at him as he walked up the long driveway, and all his doubts disappeared. After 10 minutes, he leaned slightly and put his hands on his knees, saying, "Wow, that is some driveway." It had been a nice hike to finally get to her. "I apologize for that." With a slight shrug, Momo said, "If you want, we could go inside and maybe have some iced tea. Sometimes I forget how far it is from the gate to the main house." Izuku nodded when she said, "Hoshi makes really great tea." She took his hand again and interlaced her fingers into his, enjoying the small sense of satisfaction that came from holding his hand, even though she could feel his palms getting a little wet at the moment. She wanted to think that this was because he had just walked nearly half a mile from the gate to the house, but she knew for a fact that he was anxious about her holding his hand. Izuku tried not to be nervous when Momo took his hand and then interlaced her fingers into his, but he couldn't help it. She was very attractive, and he couldn't understand why she liked to hold his hand. His mother explained that it might be because she liked him and wanted to touch him. "This is some place," Izuku said uneasily as they entered the house through the double doors. Momo replied, "It is just home." Then she led him to the main dining room and then to the main library, one of her favorite spots in the house. Izuku's eyes were wide as he looked at the enormous 3-story room filled with innumerable books, and she told him, "This is where I spend a lot of my time." She called the kitchen and ordered some iced tea and sandwiches, and they sat at one of the low tables, side by side. Izuku looked sorrowfully at some of the unsettling items in the large room, including stuffed and mounted animals. Momo noticed his expression and said, "My grandfather collected those. Personally, I have asked my father to get rid of them." Suspecting that Izuku had a connection with them because he could transform into any animal, she explained, but my grandfather was an avid hunter and he passed them on to my father. Izuku did eat meat, so as long as he did not see the animal being processed for food, it did not really bother him. Do you think you could do the same with some of them that you did with the dinosaurs? She asked, and Izuku decided she had been right before, so why not? Standing, he stepped over to the head of a lion. Placing his hand on it, he felt the familiar tingle. Did it work? She inquired. I believe so, Izuku said. I can try later outside, moving to touch each of the others before returning and sitting down beside her. She took his hand again right away, and they started talking about other animals he might want to include. Her father and mother entered at that point, and the elder Yaoyorozu frowned as he looked at the young man seated next to his daughter, clearly not liking that Momo was holding the green-haired boy's hand. Ashimomo spoke before he could say anything. My name is Ashimomo Yaoyorozu. Hello. This is Momo's mother, and her father is Tachanaka Yaoyorozu. The young man's frown vanished and a tiny grin emerged as Ashimomo murmured, It's so nice that you have come for a visit. Her mother shook the young man's hand and then gave her husband another calm, demanding gaze. Yes, it is nice to have you for a visit. Tachanaka repeated this evenly, deciding to voice his complaints later. He grabbed the young man's hand and shook it, thinking silently, Touch my daughter and I will tear you apart. His wife interrupted him before he could say anything more, and he was upset for 3 reasons. First, he didn't like that Momo wanted to be one of those stupid heroes. Second, he didn't like that he couldn't express his opinions, even though he had been unable to do so since he said, I do, years ago, and finally, his daughter appeared to like the young man sitting next to her, and anyone could see that the young man liked her. Her mother teased her daughter, saying, Oh Momo, he is really cute, I can see why you like him. This made Momo want to hide. Momo silently moaned in desperation, Mother please. She liked Izuku, but she didn't need her mother trying to force something that neither of them was likely ready for. She wanted time to see if he was someone she could hang out with, be with, and yes, be her first boyfriend. Momo was completely embarrassed, and she hoped that her mother wouldn't scare him away. She looked over and saw that his face was turning a bright shade of red. He came over to practice his quirk, she said quickly, sincerely hoping to deflect what her mother had just said. Fortunately, her father brightened greatly with interest. So, young man, what is your quirk? Momo let out a sigh of relief when Tachanaka asked, and Izuku appeared to emerge from his humiliated days as well. After hearing his father's hunting stories for years, Izuku's father grinned broadly when he said, I can change into any animal that I touch. He looked around the room at the various trophy animals on the wall and imagined actually seeing one of them up close. Yesterday Momo had me touch a bunch of dinosaurs and I was able to become each of them. Ashimomo said we would like to see that. Momo grinned back. He will then need to borrow a robe. Having to remain nude or wearing something he can take off when he changes is one of his disadvantages. After a few minutes, Momo led him outside to the backyard and said, There is a changing room in the pool house, you can leave your clothes there and put on the robe. His clothes do not survive, she remarked, going to fetch a robe for him to wear. He turned into the many dinosaur versions while standing at a distance of at least 20 meters. A lion, an elephant, a tiger, and a hawk follow. Ashimomo gazed at the 2 dinosaur predators and remarked, That is impressive, young man. Though I have to say it was a bit concerning when you turned into that small dinosaur with the teeth and then the big one with the even bigger teeth. They both appeared to be lethal. Yes it was, Tachanaka said, omitting to say that the dinosaurs and other animals' voices were what actually made him feel a little tired. He had glanced at Momo, who appeared completely unconcerned and unweary. Even when the large one with the teeth asked her which one to transform into next while glaring down at her. Tachanaka briefly believed that his daughter might be attacked by the dinosaur. Izuku initially transformed into a dog as Momo held up another robe, and then she wrapped it around him before turning around. He reverted to his human form, tightening the robe around him. Momo grinned as she stood beside Izuku. Ashimomo grabbed Tachanaka's arm and pointed him in the direction of the home before he could force himself. After observing her husband's reaction, Ashimomo gave the order, Come on Tachanaka, let us leave the young alone for a bit. Her husband grinned widely as she whispered to him, You can always spy on them in the security camera room. As Momo saw her folks go, she grinned broadly. Izuku shrugged but Momo said, That was incredible. So do you believe me now that anyone thinks you cannot be a hero is an idiot? Izuku responded, how? Yes, I can transform into all those dinosaurs and other animals, but how am I going to use that? Momo genuinely chuckled. She gave a negative shake of her head. Are you kidding? I do not know anyone that would want to face down a T-Rex or a lion. If you are one of them, then you should be able to. I do not know smash through a wall as a Triceratops or chase down someone as a cheetah. Momo replied with a grin. Izuku said, geez, I am an idiot. Momo reached down and took his hand again. She entwined her fingers with his, squeezing his hand lightly. Izuku wanted to know if her mother's statement was accurate at that very moment. Izuku uttered, barely audible, Momo, your mother said I was cute and that was the reason you liked me. He stammered a little and his voice cracked. He shouted out, do you like me or do you just like me? And Momo's face turned brighter red than Izuku's as she stared at him. Momo inhaled and exhaled, trying not to feel lightheaded or want to scream at her mother. Momo grinned and nodded slightly. As Momo spoke, she found herself speaking quickly. Yes, Izuku, I like you. But I do not want to do anything until we know each other better. At most, would it be alright that we be really close friends and maybe hang out with each other a lot? I hoped he would see what she was getting at. Momo was relieved when he nodded. Momo let out a sigh of relief as Izuku remarked, I would like that. Well, I better go put my clothes on. Also, I think I might try flying home as a hawk, when it is time for me to go home. Do you have a bag I can borrow to put my clothes into after I change? He inquired and Momo gave an understanding nod. Momo took him to the pool house so he could change back into his clothes and said, of course, and that is a good idea. But how about we go hang out in the rec room for a few hours? We can watch a movie. Making the decision to go commando once more, he shoved his underpants into his back pocket. He didn't want Momo to see or touch his underwear when he changed into a hawk later. Since he would be carrying his bag in his talons, she would need to stuff his clothes inside. She stepped outside and led him to the rec room to watch a movie, occupying a love seat couch next to him. She decided to take a step forward and wrapped his right arm around her shoulders, then pressed close to him. She clarified, just making myself comfortable. Izuku was going to be her first boyfriend, she thought to herself, when it was appropriate. Or if he began to attract the attention of another girl. Jealousy was a great incentive. When Momo took the young man to the pool house, Tachanaka was prepared to run out of the security room, where he had been keeping an eye on the monitors. His initial notion was that of the hormones of adolescence. Maybe Momo and the young man might work things out if they went inside the pool house changing room together. His arm was restrained by Ashimomo, preventing him from making a wild run out of the room. Ashimomo gently stated, emphasizing the word, yet, I doubt that they are going to do anything, dear. I do not think Momo is ready for something like that yet. He was deeply troubled and alarmed by the word. Tachanaka questioned rather paranoidly, what do you mean? Yet, are you not saying that she will soon, are you? Although I didn't really want an answer, I did want one. Ashimomo giggled and shook her head. Tachanaka started breathing heavily as Ashimomo told him, who knows husband, you have to accept that Momo is a young woman and she could at any time she wants to. Do not worry, I have already had the talk with her. Tachanaka inquired, what talk? As Ashimomo's laughter intensified, grinning slyly at him. Ashimomo responded, the sex talk, of course. She knows all about it and I even gave her a box of condoms. Just in case. Tachanaka let out a dejected grunt. Afterward, I observed the two teenagers on the monitor leaving toward the recreation room. Momo moved the boy's arm around her shoulders as they sat down. Tachanaka wanted to go stop that, so she leaned against him. However, his wife once more forbade him from interfering. She rose up, and Tachanaka gave a fierce growl. See, everything is fine. Oh, you better start getting used to seeing that young man around her. I think she plans on him being her first boyfriend. Which means they will be together a lot. I'm now seriously considering going to expel the young man and prevent him from seeing his young daughter, observing his face. With a firm command, Ashimomo said, now you leave them alone, Tachanaka. He nodded in agreement and let out a long sigh. He was left alone after his wife left. As he rolled his eyes, Tachanaka asked himself, I am the owner and CEO of one of the biggest companies in the country. What I say there is basically law. Then when I come home I have no power at all. How is that possible? He was already aware that he loved his wife and would stop at nothing to ensure her happiness. He grunted in frustration and got up to exit the monitor room. On his way to his newspaper in the living room, Izuku and Momo made their way to the front step once the movie ended. For the time being, neither of them knew how to say goodbye. They stood silently, looking at one another in the hopes that one of them would know what to do. Izuku finally made the decision to speak up in order to end the silence. I better get home. Momo, would you like to come over to my place and maybe meet my mother? Perhaps have lunch, Izuku said with a nod. Before Izuku could embarrass himself by saying something inappropriate, Momo grasped the little bag in her left hand and said, yes, I would love that. Say about 11 a.m., send me the address and I will give it to Shinji. After grinning, he transformed into a hawk. It was a big one, with wings that were both brown and white. Momo got down on his knees, packed his clothes inside the bag, and zipped it closed. The fact that there were no undergarments in the stack of clothes intrigued and slightly perplexed her. She truly didn't want to see or touch that object. The hawk placed the bag at its feet, leapt up on it, and used its talons to grasp the handle. The hawk screamed, I will see you tomorrow then. Good night, Momo. Momo grinned at the hawk. Momo said, good night, Izuku. Oh, try to enjoy flying as a hawk. The hawk then took to the skies. She waved at it as it flew over the house and circled a few times. After dipping its left wing, it took off. Momo scowled as she went back inside. In a whisper, she said, shit, I should have kissed him goodbye, ascending the stairs to her chamber. She was deeply sorry that she hadn't given him a cheek kiss. Even so, she was desperate to give him a kiss on the lips. Izuku deposited the bag of clothes on the balcony of his and his mother's apartment first, taking only 15 minutes. He landed on the railing after that, until he could jump down and transform back into a human. His mother pulled out a broom and started striking him. With an angry whack, Inko yelled, get out of here. At the large brown hawk perched on the railing, Izuku yelled, Mom, stop, it is me, as his mother slapped him with the broom once again. For a brief while, Inko held the broom ready to strike the bird once more. Izuku grabbed the sack and placed it in front of his crotch while he changed. He rubbed his head where Mom had struck him with the broom and said, geez, Mom. With a big smile and a giggle, Inko remarked, sorry, but you should have called and told me you were coming back as one of those. Izuku grinned and began to chuckle, saying, it is not funny. That broom hurt. Inko stopped laughing as he said, you know I am tempted not to tell you some good news until tomorrow. Rather, she scowled, curious because she had a right to know if he thought it was good news. He chose to tell her as a result. If it is all right, Momo is coming by to meet you and have lunch. Then Inko murmured dreadfully, oh, you should have told me before now. She turned and went inside, saying, all I have is egg noodles and some leftovers. She picked up her purse. She left before he could respond. I am going to the grocery store. Do you think she will like perhaps chicken stir-fried vegetables with rice? He asked. Izuku was able to go inside and change as a result. Momo felt her left leg start to twitch uneasily as she rode in the back of her chauffeur-driven vehicle. She now understood Izuku's feelings upon meeting her parents. However, she reasoned that since Izuku was so kind, his mother must be as well. She didn't really pay attention because her main goal was to go to the apartment building, not the other buildings or her surroundings, when the vehicle arrived in front of the structure. The driver, Shinji, said, we are here, young miss. To make room for her, I got out. However, she did it before him. Shinji scowled a little when Momo told him, I will call when I am ready to come home. In addition to being the chauffeur, he was also in charge of Momo Yaoyorozu's protection, and he wouldn't consider this location to be secure. Looking around, Momo grinned as Shinji said, are you sure, miss? This is not a really nice part of the city. Momo grudgingly went back in the driver's seat and drove away after saying, I am sure. Thank you, Shinji. Izuku exited the building's main entrance at that same moment. Uncertain of how to greet him, she smiled broadly and replied, hi Izuku. Then, choosing to follow protocol, she grabbed his left hand in hers and extended her right hand. She entwined her fingers with his. He returned her smile. Momo nodded when Izuku remarked, hello Momo. My mom has lunch almost ready. I hope you like chicken with vegetables and rice stir-fried. A blond boy came down the street and spoke loudly before he could get her inside. As his two friends chuckled, Katsuki remarked, look at that boys, Deku has a girlfriend. Now that is something you do not see every day. His eyes grew wide as he approached, appreciatively looking up and down at the female. He could empathize when he heard one of the others exclaim, "Whoa." He was deeply impressed by what he witnessed. With a broad, savage smile, Katsuki said, "You know that Deku is worthless and pathetic. How about you come be with a real man? He is prepared to defeat Izuku in order to establish his dominance over the attractive female." However, the girl burst out laughing. Without truly glancing at any of the three, Momo continued, "Now talk about pathetic. I think you and your idiots are pathetic." Instead, she tightened her hold on Izuku's hand. Katsuki was about to reply when she said, "I doubt that being a complete asshole will work forever when it comes to impressing girls. So you might want to change tactics. As for me, I think Izuku here is more of a man than you will ever be." She then escorted Izuku inside. As the elevator doors closed and they heard the noisy guy outside start to yell and scream fiercely, she questioned, "Are those the morons that told you that you cannot become a hero?" Blaming his friends for such humiliation. Izuku gave a nod. Izuku said, "Yes, that was Kachan and his friends. He is just like that." Momo shook her head in response. He smiled back at Momo, who said, "They are complete assholes and I would not believe any of them if they told me that rain was wet. Hey, next time that blonde idiot starts giving you a hard time, change into that velociraptor and maybe do that hissing growl they do. You know, like from the movies. I bet he would piss his pants," she said, and they both began to giggle. Izuku felt better right away. Izuku stopped laughing as she said, "So is your mother going to embarrass you as much as mine did to me?" Then Izuku grimaced and added, "Oh yeah, you can bet on that. She probably will do worse to me than your mother did to you." He hid every picture album he could find while his mother was cooking, particularly the ones from his early years when he was nude or in diapers. Momo gave him a kind grin while quietly appreciating his self-control. Had he been worthless, anyone else would have attempted to fight. That seemed childish to her and demonstrated the exact opposite of the kind of person she was drawn to. She had a suspicion that Izuku would have assaulted the Kachan without hesitation if he had attempted to harm her. Indeed, he was the ideal candidate to be her first formal boyfriend. The elevator doors opened as he arrived, and he escorted her to an apartment. As soon as they entered, a short, elderly woman welcomed them. With a big smile, his mother went forward to shake Momo's hand and said, "Mom, this is Momo Yaoyorozu. Momo, this is my mom, Inko Midoriya." Momo discovered that she liked the elder Midoriya immediately away when Inko said, "My oh my, you are really pretty, Momo. Are you going to be his girlfriend? Oh, can call you Momo right, or would you prefer Yaoyorozu?" She nodded with a smile. Izuku, meanwhile, let forth a dejected grunt. Izuku begged in a begging voice, "Mom, please." Sure, everyone could see Momo was attractive, but usually you don't say that and you don't ask if she wanted to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't mind, though. Momo skillfully sidestepped the awkward topic by saying, "Yes, Miss Midoriya, that is fine, and it's nice to meet you. As for that, we are friends and I am a girl, so I suppose in one way I am his girlfriend." Inko grinned and shook her head. She decided to stop making fun of her son and Momo, saying, "Please call me Inko. Oh, give it time, you two look really nice together." Inko pointed to the table in the kitchen. She sat at the table and served them everyone a generous amount of her stir-fried rice, chicken, and vegetables. "Lunch is ready, I hope you are hungry, Momo." The two adolescents sat so close to one another that Inko couldn't help but smile as they were eating. As she saw them, she thought, they are a couple even though they do not think they are. "I adore Momo." Inko proposed that Izuku show her the apartment after they finished their meal. As she carried the plates to the sink to wash them, she gave the order, "Just remember to keep the doors open." His face flushed as he guided Momo through the apartment. Izuku grinned at Momo as she questioned, "So how was it last night when you flew home as a hawk? Was it fun?" Izuku looked at his mother and answered, "Yes, it was great. Well, until my mom hit me with a broom, it was fun." His mother winced a little. In an attempt to explain why she had struck her own son with a broom, Inko stated from the kitchen, "He did not call and tell me he was going to do that. How was I supposed to know that he was going to land on my balcony as a big menacing hawk?" Momo burst out laughing. Momo continued to giggle at the idea of Inko striking Izuku with a broom and said, "Oh, I wish I could have seen that." Izuku said, "Yeah, it was really funny," and then grinned. He led Momo on, saying, "Actually we both got a good laugh over that. I plan on never turning into one of those really menacing animals with my mom around. I do not think she could handle seeing a velociraptor or lion right in front of her. He remarked to her, and Momo understood completely. When she saw any of those up close, her own mother was a little taken aback. Momo thought Izuku would be a fantastic hero because of this. Fear was the best tool against a villain. When Izuku attempted to hurry Momo past his bedroom, she paused and peered inside. Looking around the room at nearly every action figure, poster, and other souvenir that had been produced, Momo said, "Wow, that is a lot of All Might memorabilia." Izuku flushed instantly. Glancing at the ground, Izuku attempted to explain why there were so many people in his room by saying, "I really respect and admire him." From the kitchen came his mother. Choosing not to actually embarrass her son by bringing up the underwear in the drawer, Inko said, "Look in his closet, Momo. You will see at least 3 dozen t-shirts, sweatshirts, and pants with All Might on them." Momo made the decision to spare him more humiliation. She continued walking but paused at the balcony, observing the ocean a little distance away. Momo said, "Hey, can we go take a walk on the beach?" And Izuku's response was a shrug. As they made their way to the door, Izuku replied, "Sure, why not? Since it's Sunday, there won't be too many people on it." Momo put her fingers in his and gripped his right hand in her left as soon as they left the apartment. Holding his hand again, Momo felt better as she rode the elevator down. She felt a little self-conscious about making any kind of contact with him in the apartment while his mother was observing them, not wanting to give his mother more reasons to humiliate him. In addition, she didn't want Inko to believe they were dating. Well, not just yet. Momo saw that the blonde boy and his cronies were waiting outside, in front of the apartment building. With the decision to simply guide Izuku away from any conflict, Momo said, "Geez, they are a glutton for punishment." However, because she had embarrassed him in front of his cronies, the blonde boy was on the prowl and wanted retribution, sprinting to catch them. Kachan smirked broadly and said, "Look, it is Deku and the warped slut that prefers worthless assholes over those that are way superior." His 2 disciples burst out laughing. Momo felt Izuku tremble next to her as she opened her mouth to speak. Angry, Izuku stared at Katsuki Bakugo and snarled, "Do not call her that, Kachan. Do not ever call her that," he said. "Now tell her you apologize." Momo was impressed by Izuku's look. She was correct. Even though he would be mistreated, he would always stand up for her. Katsuki stared back, rolling his eyes. Katsuki said and then laughed, "Okay, I'm sorry, you're a slut. Happy now, Deku." The other 2 laughed heartily before squealing in terror. "What are you going to turn into, a dog and piss on my leg? That is about all you have." Katsuki gazed at the object in front of him with wide eyes. Momo stepped aside nonchalantly and gave Izuku, who was now a velociraptor, a proud smile. The blonde boy backed away as it growled and hissed at him. "What the fuck is that thing?" he exclaimed, his face twisted with horror as the long, sharp claw clicked against the concrete. Momo told the blonde moron Kachan, "That is a velociraptor, one of the most dangerous predators from the Cretaceous period. Haven't you morons ever seen the movie Jurassic Park?" The 2 other boys had fled. Go change their underwear, she suspected. Wondering what else Izuku may become, Katsuki whispered, "Shit, you can turn into one of those." Following his escaping cronies, he bounded off after saying, "Well, I still think your quirk is worthless." Izuku the raptor growled. He forgot to apologize. Then it began to giggle, which Momo found a little unsettling. Momo nodded when the raptor asked, "Could you go inside and get me some clothes? I'm also beginning to laugh." Momo pointed to some of the other people who were staring and pointing at the dinosaur from all around them and said, "You might want to change into something else. You are drawing a lot of attention." Izuku transformed into a black and white cat, bobbing its head. She went down and scooped up the cat, which started purring, saying, "You know, it might be easier if I just did this." As she carried him back to the apartment and placed him in his room, she said, "Good kitty," then proceeded to inform Inko of the reason behind her recent cat carrying into the apartment. They came back a few minutes later to take a stroll down the shore. As they entered the beach, Izuku remarked, "I need to figure out a way to not either start out naked or shred my clothes when I change." Momo nodded and grinned. Momo said, "I can see that is a major problem. But it was funny with how that Kachan and his buddies reacted. I think those 2 idiots actually pissed their pants and Kachan was not far off from doing it too." She said with a grin. Confronting them felt wonderful to him, but he hoped he didn't have to. However, it was unacceptable for Kacchan to disparage Momo. In order to prove a point, he chose to follow her advice and transform into a velociraptor. Last night, Momo had an almost overwhelming need to do something she wanted to do as they were walking hand in hand. Then she made the decision to just do it. She clasped his other hand in hers and stepped ahead of him. She had an entire speech she wanted to deliver before doing this, but she said, Izuku, I am about to do something. I hope that, oh hell. She leaned in his direction, cocked her head to the right, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was only for a few seconds and was short. However, it was sufficient to inform him that she did, in fact, like him. She smiled at him as she stepped back, and he returned the smile. If I known that if I stood up to Kacchan that it would lead to you kissing me, I would have done it the day we met. Izuku smiled broadly. Momo grinned even more and shook her head. Momo concluded the speech she had intended to give but at the time simply wanted to kiss him. No, that is just something I wanted to do. It has nothing to do with that asshole. I like you, Izuku, and I hope we can continue to build our friendship into maybe something more. He gave a hearty nod. As they walked behind him, Izuku smiled broadly and added, that is fine with me. I like you too, Momo, and I would like to build our friendship into something more. Then she had a thought. Momo looked out to see a shark's fin slicing the water's surface and said, I was just thinking, have you tried to change into any fish? He looked out at the open lake and shrugged. Then he shook his head slowly. Izuku said, no, I think I might wait a while before I try that. He wasn't sure if he would want to transform into a marine creature just yet, observing the look on his face as he gazed out to sea. They resumed their stroll when Momo said, okay, I was just curious. Though I think that might be a good idea. Unless you have a need, I do not think anything like a shark would be useful right now. When they arrived at the dock, they turned around and made their way back. Momo needed to get home quickly because it was getting late in the day. She pulled out her phone and called Shinji to arrange for her to be picked up. I think it might be a good idea to continue to practice changing into the different animals, find a combination of a way to both attack and defend. She advised and Izuku gave a nod. Izuku said, enjoying having someone to bounce ideas off of and offering insightful advice, that is a good idea. She decided that she would at most offer him a quick hug as her car arrived. As Momo explained, she saw that he was relieved. I think we need to slow it down a bit. Do not get me wrong, I liked kissing you, Izuku. But I want to really get to know you before we do anything more of that again. As she opened the car door, he gave her a hug in return. He grinned when she replied, give me a call later and maybe we can get together and do something tomorrow. See you later. Izuku said, yes, see you later. He then observed the car drive away. He grinned widely when he could no longer see it. Going back to his apartment with his mother. He was all set for the inquest his mother was about to subject him to. Momo discovered that she enjoyed having Izuku as a close friend and spent nearly every day hanging out. She even assisted him in preparing for the Written Hero exam. He would soon need to complete the next step in order to enroll in any of the schools. However, she was adamant that he join her at UA. Now in 2 weeks is the practical admittance examination. I think it would be best you go with the big dinosaurs for that. I did some research and if you are going to do a combination type attack during the test, I would go with first being a velociraptor, then when needed change into a T-Rex. The velociraptor can run at cheetah speeds and the T-Rex has the strength along with the ferocity to cause some real damage against the testing robots. She clarified and Izuku nodded. She wrinkled her nose when Izuku said, that is a good idea. I have added a couple more animals into my collection. The Amazon anaconda and the American alligator. She kept wrinkling her nose as he inquired, what? He thought it was adorable that she did that. Momo firmly said, I do not really like snakes. To be honest, she was a little terrified by the repulsive items. They frightened her. He chuckled softly. Izuku raised his right palm in the air and stated, okay, I swear not to change into the 4 kinds of snakes I have incorporated around you. Momo grinned and let out a breath. His smile returned Momo's. No, it is all right, I just have to remember it is you and not a real snake. So how did you get to touch those 2? He said. Went to the zoo and asked one of the handlers if I could. I had to explain the reason and after I showed him that I could change into any animal after I touched it, he let me. Say, do you want to come with me tomorrow? He is going to let me touch a couple other animals. Izuku requested and Momo gave a nod. Momo threw her hand over her lips after saying, "Sounds like a fun date." I'm shocked that she just said it was a date. None of their times had been designated as dates. Then, grinning widely, she said forcefully, "Screw it. We need to just admit it. We are dating," she explained, "but we are not to the point that we are a couple yet." Not meaning it, but saying it. They were in her mind. Izuku took her first to a neighboring bathroom at the zoo, where he changed into a robe, putting his entire wardrobe in a bag and giving it to her to carry. After that, they made their way to the administration office located in the middle of the zoo. A heavy-set man knocked on one of the doors, opened it, and grinned. The man said, "Ah, welcome back, so what animals are you wanting to touch today?" Before pointing to Momo, he said, "Who is this?" And Izuku answered right away. The man was not really listening when Izuku said, "This is Momo Yaoyorozu, a friend of mine. I hope it is okay that she comes along, she just wants to watch. As for what animals, I am not sure, sir, what do you suggest?" The attractive young girl standing next to the young man had his whole attention. He glanced back at the young man, suddenly realizing that he was looking at someone who was likely young enough to be his granddaughter. The man finally remarked, avoiding eye contact with the young woman to avoid upsetting her, "I think the Siberian tiger and perhaps the black rhino to start with." Momo simply ignored the old man's stare after noticing it. She was accustomed to men looking at her, it was a common occurrence. She was aware that the old man was most likely considering her nude appearance or some other twisted idea. As long as he didn't try to turn his ideas into reality, she wasn't really bothered by that. She tightened her grip on Izuku's hand as she became aware of the admiring gazes of others. A few yards away, the man led the way to an enclosure. He stepped up to the bars and offered out a big piece of steak, saying, "His name is Tony and he is about 1 year old, born in captivity, so he should be docile enough." Tony walked over, and Izuku cautiously caressed the tiger once he was close to the bars. Taking a step back and giving Momo a nod, he transformed into a perfect replica of the tiger. "Wow, that is so impressive." Izuku snarled in his tiger form, "Thank you." The man stepped back. Momo grinned as the man said, "You know, it is really disturbing to hear a tiger talk." She was accustomed to it. He heard something that bothered him more than the lead handler before he transformed back into a human. Izuku, in tiger form, gazed at Tony with wide eyes for a moment after Tony remarked, "We do talk." Izuku stepped closer, looked at the tiger, and shook his striped cat head, saying, "What, do you not believe that we have our own language, Izuku Midoriya?" "Well, we do." He questioned whether he was truly listening to Tony talk. To avoid coming across as impolite, Izuku attempted to explain, "This is just strange and I never thought I would be able to speak to you, Tony." However, he couldn't figure out how he could understand Tony. All Momo and the lead handler could hear as they stood there listening was Tony and Izuku's growling and a few groans. Momo inquired worriedly, Izuku, are you going to change back to human?" Izuku turned and gazed up at her. Izuku gave her a human-like growl before turning back to face Tony. "In a minute, this is really different. I will explain in a minute." Izuku was told by the genuine tiger Gregor, "My name is not Tony. I am Grrrgrrt, I guess the closest translation is Gregor." With a little snarling grin, Gregor turned and returned to a place where he could lie down and slumber. "Do me a favor when you turn back into a stupid human, tell Stanley there that I really hate fish." Izuku transformed back into a human and covered himself with the robe that was close by. Momo had grown accustomed to looking back before he had to inquire. He began to smile widely after he was human again. Izuku said, still grinning, "Okay, something new and it is really cool." Izuku told the handler, who was staring at him in disbelief, "It seems that when I am in animal form, I can talk to the animal that I am at that moment. For example, me and Gregor there just talked. Oh, by the way, sir, his name is not Tony, it is Gregor and he really hates fish." Momo grinned broadly and remarked, "Now that is really cool. So you can talk to animals." Izuku told her, and Momo laughed, utterly impressed. "Well, only those that I am at that moment. If I turn into a lion, I would not be able to talk to, say, a gorilla. I guess they all have a form of language." The handler was more than willing, initially noting on a pad that Tony the tiger was actually Gregor the tiger and that he detested fish. "So on to the next one, sir. I want to see if I can talk to the rhino as well." Izuku was shocked to learn that he could communicate with animals. As Izuku was in the restroom putting his clothes back on, Momo threw the stack of phone numbers she had gathered in the trash before leaving the zoo. Izuku scowled at the trash can and questioned, "What are those?" Momo smiled, took his hand again, and interlaced her fingers into his, saying, "Nothing important." She detested the fact that she was always greeted by at least a dozen young men who gave her business cards or slips of paper with their phone numbers on them. The fact that they all saw her holding hands with Izuku was what really infuriated her. Even though they knew she was with someone, they still made an effort. She said, "Izuku, may I ask you a favor?" And he grinned back. Izuku immediately responded, still thrilled at his ability to communicate with animals, of course anything. Izuku paused and gazed at Momo with wide eyes as she questioned, "When we go places together, could you introduce me as your girlfriend?" His face lit up with a broad smile. "Izuku, I think I need to explain, you did notice when I threw that bunch of papers and business cards away, right?" He grinned. "Well, they were from a bunch of men young and old that want me to contact them. That happens almost every place I go, I am tired of it. Now I am hoping that if they think I am involved with someone, that you are my boyfriend, then they might leave me alone. It would just be for show when you introduce me. I do like you, Izuku, and I want to wait to make sure we know each other completely before we, become a couple." She struggled to speak, hoping he understood. But she was upset with herself in her head. She thought, then saw Izuku nod, "Just admit it, you want to be his girlfriend and be a couple." Izuku's voice carried a note of sadness as he continued, "Sure, I guess that makes sense. Though it is a bit true, like you said before. You are a girl and you are my friend. So it works the other way, I am a boy and I am your friend." Momo started to walk on, thinking maybe she should just do what she was thinking. Admit that she wanted to date him and be in a relationship with him. I had no idea why she was complicating things so much. When Izuku arrived for the UA practical examination, Momo strolled beside him. Another robe was in the bag over his shoulder. Momo wanted to come and see him, but she was exempt from taking the practical exam because she had been recommended. She saw a sizable crowd of people who had come to take the exam as they got closer to the UA entrance. The fact that she was unable to hold his hand and attempt to calm his test-taking anxiety worried her a little. Anybody who entered the school was subject to the zero public displays of affection policy. She had to fight the want to take his hand so as not to be singled out before she actually went. That in and of itself gave her a lot of trouble, but it also turned into something amazing. To introduce himself, Izuku moved closer to a few of the others. Momo, however, had to stay apart from the other onlookers. So, there was an issue. As she grasped his hand and shook it, Mina, a pink-skinned, horned girl with yellow eyes, said, "Hello there, I am Mina Ashido. Are you here to take the test?" Momo saw the girl grinning as she gazed at Izuku from the spectator section. Momo glanced at Izuku and then at the pink girl, jealousy roaring in her thoughts. She wanted to cross the dividing lines, but she wasn't sure. However, it would be violent. As she imagined something that made her anger boil, she tried to hear what either was saying. With interest, Izuku said, "Izuku Midoriya. You are one of those that your quirk has changed your appearance and body." Mina nodded and grinned. "That is the polite way to say it, but yes. Another one is that I am a quirk mutation. One of the much nicer, nastier ones is that I am a mutated oddity. I can create acid, from a minor sulfuric to a heavy corrosive type." Mina said and then pointed at him. She continued to smile at the adorable green-haired lad and inquired, "So what is your quirk?" Mina's eyes glowed as Izuku said, "I can change into any animal that I have touched." After deciding not to introduce herself to anyone else, Mina remarked, "That is interesting." With a broad smile, she said, "So we might be classmates and maybe friends." Izuku had to concede that, despite Mina's obvious differences, she was incredibly adorable. A close second to Momo in terms of beauty. Then he felt embarrassed because he had no idea who he was or what Momo was. However, he did felt that by becoming close with Mina and finding her attractive, he was betraying her. Fortunately, the test was about to begin. He turned, gave Momo a wave, and went inside. He instantly transformed into a German Shepherd dog inside, removing the robe next to the door and sitting down to wait for the test. Izuku recognized Shota Iwaza when one of the teachers questioned, "Hey, how did this dog get in here?" The instructor, who was commonly referred to as Eraserhead, approached to guide the dog out the door. As the teacher looked down at him in disbelief, Izuku the dog hissed and gently barked, "Excuse me, sir. But I am here to take the test. I am Izuku Midoriya, particularly when you hear a dog speak. Oh, that is right, your quirk allows you to change into animals. Okay, I hope you have a better animal to turn into. I doubt that a German Shepherd would be effective against the robots. Iwaza was intrigued. Izuku made the decision to transform into something larger while grinning like a dog. Choosing the one Momo had advised him to begin with. A velociraptor. As he gazed at the menacing dinosaur that was now stooped slightly in front of him, the teacher took an uncontrollable step back. Mina and other kids gazed with mild uneasiness at the sight of a predator that should have been extinct. Izuku, the now velociraptor, hissed and growled, "Will this do SSSIRRR?" When Eraserhead saw the sharp carnivorous fangs and the claws that were constantly hammering on the cement floor, he nodded uneasily. Iwaza gave a stern command as he left, saying, "Very much so. Do not eat any of the other students." He looked back to make sure he wasn't being attacked by the creature. Mina approached cautiously as the other teachers packed out, saying, "A fucking velociraptor, exactly like the one from that movie. I think I might watch his progress in the test, see what other animals he can change into." With a hint of nervousness, Mina said, Say, Izuku. You are not going to eat any of us, are you?" Izuku retorted, shaking the reptilian head from side to side. Izuku the raptor snarled in response, "Of course not. I may look like a velociraptor RRR, but I am still human." Every other student who heard them became noticeably more at ease, but continued to watch the nearly 7-foot dinosaur with fatigue. Izuku the velociraptor ran 5 minutes later, head down for counterbalance and tail straight behind him. As he sped past a few barriers, Momo had been correct. He thought he must resemble one of those in the film. He dashed ahead in the direction of one of the point-level robots, transformed into a triceratops in an instant, and struck it with all 3 horns. Essentially slamming through the robot, trailing wires and pieces of the now destroyed robot as they emerged out the other side. Every time had been unique. The last time, he had transformed into a T-Rex and used his teeth to tear the last one to pieces, using one of his big clawed feet to hold it down. For a while, he questioned whether he was being a bit too cruel. He transformed into a stegosaurus and smacked another robot with his spiked tail, causing it to fly against a nearby building wall and crumble into a sparking mess. He wanted his ability to transform into a variety of animals to be seen by the teachers. He struck the robot twice more with his tail, noticing that it was still moving. At last, it sagged and didn't even move, being transformed into a hawk. He soared high enough to cause any robot to emerge from hiding. He nearly ran into one of the non-point arena trap robots as he soared along, slipping about its massive body of metal. When it attempted to strike him, he just dodged the flailing robot and was ready to continue looking for those valuable points. Unfortunately, it had entirely missed him before smashing into a mimic building and sending pieces of rubble flying in the direction of some of the other competitors. He saw as a 3-foot portion trapped the girl's leg beneath it, and a large section just missed the girl he had seen earlier. She tried to break free by straining against the block, and then she tried to melt it. Simply put, there was no time. Uncontrollably, the arena trap robot stomped in her direction. Izuku instantly transformed into a brontosaurus and flew up over the enormous robot. He rumbled loudly as he descended on the arena trap robot, using full 4 tons and all 4 feet. Cannonball. Crushing it nearly to nothing. He transformed into a silverback gorilla, leapt to the ground, and removed the block from Mina's leg. Izuku said, "Are you alright?" Mina got up and looked at her leg. Mina, who now genuinely liked Izuku Midoriya as he transformed into a tiger, grinned widely and added, "Yes, nothing seems to be broken. Thank you for saving my ass from that arena robot." Izuku growled as a Siberian tiger and stated, "We better get back to collecting points SS." She then nodded slightly and left to get more point trap robots. And he followed suit. He found another and, while on top of it, pounced on it as a gorilla. Transformed into an elephant and also defeated that one. He transformed back into a velociraptor and slid off it as an anaconda. Time had to be made up for him. It's unclear how many points he had accrued. He found 4 more robots while racing through the streets and quickly and easily killed them. I still thought he was acting a bit barbaric, while using his bare silverback gorilla hands to tear apart another robot. After 10 minutes, the buzzer signaled the end of the competition, and he made his way back to the entrance, transforming into a small chimpanzee, donning the robe, and then changing back to human. Momo made another idea. He was hot, sticky, and filthy. He observed that several of the others were not feeling well as he followed them out. He had a suspicion that they hadn't even managed to score any points. Mina hurried out to meet him. Mina grinned broadly and continued, "Say, I really appreciate that you kept me from being hurt by that big hunk of tin." If the arena trap robot had announced that she was eliminated from the contest, it would have been a complete failure. She owed him a lot. She said, "Hey, how about I take you out to dinner later as a means of thanks?" And Izuku shifted uneasily, looking about in an attempt to find Momo. He felt rather vulnerable because she had his clothes. Mina approached him and gave him a sly look. Admitting that he was tempted, he swallowed. The way she was staring at him made his hormones pound. She was exotically cute. Then, behind him, he heard a familiar voice clear her throat. He had neglected to check behind him since he was so preoccupied. Momo left the monitor spectator room and made her way to the exam entrance. When she walked out the door with the little book bag containing Izuku's clothes, she saw what she feared most. She heard the girl ask Izuku to dinner as a thank you for saving her after she had witnessed Izuku free the pink girl from the arena trap robot. As she cleared her throat, Momo thought, "Over my dead body." She felt her jealousy turn into a fiery wrath. When the pink girl attempted to take her Izuku away from her, she stepped in between them. Momo sarcastically glanced over her shoulder at the pink girl and murmured, "Oh, excuse me." Izuku held the bag against his chest. Momo wrinkled her nose a little and Izuku murmured, "Momo, that is a bit rude." Next, with a slight grin, with a trace of rage in her voice, Momo said firmly, "I apologize, let me introduce myself. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu, and I believe you have met Izuku Midoriya, my boyfriend." "Yes, I have. I am Mina Ashido. You know he saved me in there from being disqualified and I was trying to thank him." Mina was beaming. Momo let out a strong breath and then took a loud inhale. Momo curtly said, "Yes, I know. I am afraid he will not be able to go to dinner with you, because he is taking me out later." She then gave Izuku a fierce look, defying him to disagree. Momo still felt compelled to punch the cute pink girl in the face as she turned to face Mina. With the same sly smirk, she said, "Honey, I think you might want to go put your clothes on." Izuku had no understanding what was happening and simply shook his head. However, he did see that Momo was not feeling well. She was actually furious, and he questioned whether he had done something incorrectly. Momo watched him walk away until he was out of earshot. Her voice was so menacing that it even startled her. "Listen, he is mine and I have no intention of having some other girl swoop in and take him away from me." Mina gave a brief explanation, and Momo appeared to calm down. "I think you have the wrong idea about me. Yes, I think he is cute and I did want to thank him for saving me in there. But I would never be the type that steals boys from other girls. I am sorry, I guess I overreacted. He is my first boyfriend. In truth, I had been a little confused if he and I were a couple or not. But I do like him a lot and I guess I want to be in a relationship with him." Momo stated that she liked Mina, being aware that they might become buddies if they wind up going to UA together. "It is understandable. Because of my exotic appearance, girls always think I am going to take their boyfriends away from them. Or boys think of me as some type of easy fuck," Mina said, and Momo understood completely. She had gathered almost a dozen business cards from other spectators in the monitor room, even here at the UA. To make them visible to Mina, she raised them up. As Momo tossed the papers and cards into a nearby dumpster, she remarked, "We have more in common than that we both like Izuku. I seem to collect a lot of these," giving Mina a kind smile. "How about this, as a means of me apologizing for being such a bitch and a way you can thank Izuku? You come with us to dinner. We both could use another friend." Mina responded immediately with a grin. Mina grinned broadly at Momo and replied, "I would like that." They continued to converse while they awaited Izuku's return. He was completely bewildered in the locker room. He first questioned whether he and Momo were actually his girlfriend. A week prior, she had requested that he present her to other people as his girlfriend. However, that was really a tactic to prevent people from making advances on her. That's what she told him, anyway. She appeared to be upset about something outside just now, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. Or if she was upset with him because of something he did wrong. Reluctant to leave the locker area to find out, he put the robe in the bag and put on his shirt. He paused before approaching the two girls after peeking out from the locker room. When they were outside the UA, Momo smiled and took his hand, interlacing her fingers into his. It is about time, Izuku. Come on, we all are going out to dinner to celebrate and as a means for Mina to thank you. On the opposite side of Momo, Mina walked. She didn't want to appear to be attempting to walk in front of Izuku. She understood it was better to have as many friends as possible, but she still had some from the former school. Particularly if they were all able to attend UA. Mina went to the restroom to wash her hands after dining at a diner. Momo leaned in closer to Izuku after the pink girl shut the door. In order to demonstrate that she was serious, she leaned closer and cocked her head to the left. Okay, I am done being confusing or lying to you anymore. We are a couple and you are my boyfriend. Plain and simple, no, this is not another farce to dissuade others from hitting on me. I really like you, Izuku, and I want to be your real girlfriend. She pressed her mouth on his. Unlike the last 3 occasions, this kiss lasted longer than a few seconds. No, she gave him a kiss until their noses were both laboring. She pressed her forehead against his, parting just enough. In the hopes that she was merely presuming he did want to be her girlfriend, she said, "Is that all right, that I am officially your girlfriend?" She hadn't given him an opportunity to speak. Izuku gave her a smile. Izuku said, unsure of what it meant to be her boyfriend, "Perfectly all right. I have wanted to be ever since I met you." This was all new to them both and a little perplexing. He had a suspicion that he would need to search it up online or ask his mother. He had to go do the same when Mina came back. Clean his face and arms of the oil and grime from the robots. He stated as he stood up and made his way to the restroom, "I'll be right back." Mina gave Momo a big smile. Momo flushed a little as Mina sat down and remarked, "I saw you two kissing. That did not look like something either of you did before." "Well, not that long. No, at most we kissed only for a few seconds. I actually have to thank you. If I had not become jealous then who knows when I would to be with him." Momo told her the truth. She had been rather perplexed about who she and Izuku were for the past month. She enjoyed having him as a friend and has desired more from him ever since they first met. Momo shook her head and chuckled as Mina said, "Well, if we are telling the truth, if you two ever break up, would it be all right if I go after him?" Momo looked up and saw that Izuku had come back. "Do not count on us breaking up anytime soon. I may be confused, but I do know that I do want him as my boyfriend for a long time." He no longer had grime and grease on his hands and face. She took his hand again, placed it over her shoulders, and leaned firmly on him as she sat close to Momo. For the next 2 hours, they conversed, and the new pair thought they had made a friend. Mina did the same. Momo and Izuku dropped Mina off at the train station and exchanged phone numbers. Momo summoned Shinji to come and get them. She made the decision to stay a few more hours at her now official boyfriend's apartment, even though it was still earlier, roughly 6 o'clock in the afternoon. She grinned at him while she waited. "It takes about a week for the school to contact those that they want to attend. I know they will inform you, but there is a problem. We might not be in the same class. I am slated to be in 1A, you could end up being in 1B. He replied with a shrug. Momo winced a little when Izuku said, "As long as I get to attend that will be fine. I guess at most we can see each other after school and on weekends." She didn't want to see him only on the weekends and after school. She wanted to watch him closely, which is why she wanted him in the same class. There would be others who share Mina's opinion if she thought he was attractive. What she knew was hers had to be protected. Specifically, him. After a week, Momo sat on the couch while Izuku struggled with the UA envelope. Inko waited anxiously behind the kitchen counter for him to open the envelope that had been sealed. Momo, feeling a little impatient, made a letter opener and pushed it in his direction. As he took the metal opener and placed it under the edge, she ordered, "Open that thing already." Opening things up, there was a DVD disc inside. The three of them watched with anticipation as All Might appeared on the screen after he inserted it into the player and pressed the play button. Momo only paid attention to what class her boyfriend would be in and whether he would be attending. Despite her admiration for All Might, Izuku thought he was dull and long-winded. Gasping, Izuku grinned widely and said, "I made it. I am going to attend UA." However, he was still unsure about the class he would be in. As All Might gestured to a board with Class 1A and 1B stenciled on it, Momo grabbed the remote control, fast-forwarded it past a lengthy, in-depth speech, and halted it. Her heart was pounding as she stared at the television. Both Inko and Izuku gazed at the TV. The suspense was killing Momo, so she muttered, "Come on. Say it, Class 1A." She hoped All Might would stop and then inform Izuku that he was in Class 1A. She let out a short, relieved breath when the large hero-turned teacher finally gestured under Class 1A. Not caring if his mother watched, she grabbed Izuku and gave him a kiss. Then the dreadful news reached them. Both of them identified him as Shota Iwaza when another teacher showed up. They returned their focus to the TV and listened carefully. There is two subjects that needs to be discussed prior you attending. I believe I need to inform you that a couple of the evaluators of the test found that you were a little savage while confronting the trap robots. It is hoped that such behavior will be restrained when dealing with live opponents. Eraserhead said, and then his face became more bitter. The teacher had to clarify because they were legally unable to enforce any such rules outside of school property. It has also come to the school's attention that you have a romantic relationship with another potential student. Please review the no public displays of affection policies and rules while on school campus grounds. These will be strictly enforced, though these rules and policies are only enforced on campus grounds. If the school tried to control what students could or could not do outside of school, any student would have a field day in a lawsuit. He concluded by saying, "Congratulations on being selected to attend UA." After a brief period of darkness, the screen switched to the menu screen. The rules and policies for interpersonal relationships were printed on the pages Izuku took out of the envelope after looking inside. He raised it for Momo to see. With a little smirk, Inko said, "What do they think you two are going to do while at school? Start making out in class?" In a strange way, she hoped that she and Momo would stick together through school and maybe even a year or two later because she genuinely liked Momo. She could well picture seeing green-eyed, dark-haired infants paying their grandmother a visit. Although Momo found it a little unsettling that the school was aware that they were boyfriend and girlfriend, she stated, "I think they just want to make sure we are not going to do something that embarrasses the school." She didn't believe what her parents told them because, among other things, her mother was like Inko and her father was living in total denial. Thinking they were a very adorable couple, Mina Ishido knew she wouldn't tell. The sole reason was that all attending students had undergone a comprehensive check by the school administration. This indicated that they had conducted extensive study on them, interviewed anybody they could locate, and watched them for a brief while. In some respects, it seemed like a privacy violation. "It will be all right, like I said when there was a chance I got into 1B instead of 1A. We can do things after school and on weekends. I doubt they can restrict us from going to lunch together or sitting next to each other in class. We just cannot hold hands or do anything," Izuku replied with a sigh. She enjoyed doing everything. This includes the hugs and kisses. They essentially went out and spent a lot of time together before to announcing that they were an official couple. Therefore, the only significant change in their relationship was their affection for one another, which really perplexed them both, pondering whether being a boyfriend and girlfriend was more than that. Yes, they were both aware of it, but neither was ready to consider having sex just yet. With a sardonic smile, Inko said, "So how about lunch?" With a sparkle in her eyes, Momo said, "Any chance on stir-fried chicken with vegetables and rice?" She might have a fine dining chef. However, Inko Midoriya was a very talented chef, and her specialty was rice and chicken with vegetables. Midoriya, the older, grinned broadly. Momo grinned broadly when Inko said, "If that is what you want. Of course I have already started it. Since it seems you really like it, Momo." She got up to assist Inko, who waved her away. She said, reaching over the counter to retrieve 3 plates, "Nope, all that is left is to combine it and it is done." They discussed how amazing it would be to attend UA and eventually become heroes as they were eating. Izuku and Momo both asked their only other buddy over the course of the following week in an effort to completely understand what their connection involved. Ishido Mina, however, she wasn't entirely clear what being in a relationship entailed. They were essentially doing what they were supposed to be doing together, as far as she could tell. In addition, you should spend time with her and build a friendship. However, Mina had to constantly remind herself that Momo and Izuku were in a relationship. She therefore did not want to take any action that might damage her friendship with both of them. Momo found that Mina's overtly flirty behavior was not deliberate. She was just that way. Therefore, Momo found it quite easy to like Mina as a friend. At Izuku's, the three of them were having a good time together. As she gulped on her drink, Mina questioned, "Are you two as nervous and anxious as I am about Monday?" Izuku had found out about it, and she and Momo both adored it. A scoop of vanilla ice cream with grape soda. Momo nodded and put a spoonful of ice cream in her lips. Momo looked at Izuku and scowled. Oh yeah, especially since we have no idea about any of the others. Except me and Izuku know one of the others. He is not someone that either of us likes. Curiosity drove Mina to question, you do, who is he? She was a little unsure if he was like Izuku, and if so, she might be able to find a boyfriend of her own. Izuku said calmly, Kachan, or actually his name is Katsuki Bakugo. Momo winced. As Mina started to ponder what Katsuki Bakugo could have done to make both of her new friends dislike him, Momo remarked, a real asshole. I have no idea how he got in. He is not the type one would say could be a hero. More like a villain. Momo kept frowning as Mina told them, I doubt he would get in if the school thought that. Momo understood that Izuku still secretly thought Katsuki was a friend, so she replied, well, I think they screwed up on that one. He is nothing more than a bully, a complete asshole that picked on Izuku for years. Telling him his quirk was worthless. Momo was still upset by Katsuki calling her a slut. If I were you, Mina, I would not let myself be alone with him. He tried that, let me prove I am superior by beating up someone, ploy. A real pathetic moron. You can't impress a girl, especially her, like that. No, her boyfriend was the one who truly impressed her. They both nodded as Mina said, thanks, I think I will. You two do not mind that I hang out with you during school, right? Yes, of course. You are our friend Mina. That is why I warned you about Katsuki Bakugo. I do not want you to get into trouble, and he is trouble with a capital T. Momo replied with a grin. Then scowled in mockery. She gazed at the empty glass after finishing her treat. Momo followed suit a moment later. Momo smiled slyly and said, Izuku, is there any chance of a refill? He gave a small laugh. Izuku stood up, got their glasses, and went to the kitchen to prepare them each a glass of the concoction. I guess so. After a minute, he came back and gave one to Momo, then to Mina, setting his down. She took the glass in his palm and softly drew him in, kissing him for 10 seconds. Momo smiled gratefully at her boyfriend and added, thank you. Then led him to take a seat beside her once more. Mina laughed. With a faint undertone of jealousy, Mina said, I almost feel sorry for you two. You can't be all lovey-dovey next week at school. How are you going to be able to handle that? They seemed like the ideal pair to her. Something else was scheduled on Monday, so Momo wrinkled her brow after declaring, we will cope. However, she was unable to recall what it was. Cycles on the first day, sorry, Izuku. Momo growled as he woke up, made a tiny sledgehammer, and smashed the alarm clock. She woke up and realized that it was a different time of the month, and it wasn't as mild as the previous 2 times. After taking a shower in the bathroom, she went to her drawer and took out a box of petite maxi pads. After taking out one of the pads and putting it into her panties, Momo yelled furiously, shit, why now, and why does it have to be one that makes me feel bloated and sore? She wanted to yell at anyone who irritated her, toss things, and get angry. She slipped 2 more pads into the pockets of the school uniform. Despite the fact that she required the limpets to create, she chose to forego breakfast and stomped down the stairs. She was unable to consume anything at the moment. She noticed Shinji waiting when she stepped outdoors. Shinji replied cheerfully, "Ah, good morning, miss. It looks like it is going to be a really nice day." She sent him a frown. Momo growled, "What is good about it?" And Shinji winced. He closed the door and winced as he took his phone from his pocket. Knowing that it would be better to avoid upsetting her in any way, Shinji said, "Crap. Looks like one of those bad ones this month." He wouldn't ask or speak while operating the vehicle. When Momo was like this, you knew that the best course of action was to act as though a police officer had stopped you. Keep your mouth shut and say nothing. He turned off the radio and drove away without trying to lift her spirits. He feared the consequences after making that error once. He hurried to the school and opened the door. Momo said calmly, "I will call when I am ready to be picked up." Shinji made the decision to be at the parking lot at least 30 minutes before her scheduled departure time for the day. Not wanting any of her wraiths to happen, Shinji breathed a sigh of relief and drove off. He had made it through the first day of what would likely be a very demanding week. As Momo saw the car drive away, she complained, then turned to face the door. The fact that Shinji did not pick up Izuku irritated her a little. However, her boyfriend had made up his mind to take the train. It made logical at the time, but not today. It only informed her that he didn't want to hang out with her for the 20 minutes before school. Then she noticed him and Mina approaching her. She waited to face them while they were both laughing. She stared at them as she drew nearer. With a firm demand, she asked, "What is so funny?" Mina looked at Momo and said, "Oh hi Momo, it was just really nothing." She was aware that something was wrong. When Momo saw Izuku, she usually smiled at him. She suddenly appeared as though she was prepared to rip his head off, nevertheless. The girl with the dark hair had her hands balled into fists. Momo asked in a slightly irate tone, "So you two are riding the train together?" Izuku gave her a perplexed expression. Izuku told her, and Momo gave him a stern look. "Don't you remember Momo, we told you that Mina catches the train at Station 4 and I catch the same train at Station 6. Then it comes here to Station 1. Then appeared to loosen up a little." Momo turned and pointed to the main gate, saying, "I do remember." She said, "Shall we go? I do not want to be late." Izuku shrugged and started to follow until Mina put a hand on his arm to prevent him, keeping him a few steps away from Momo, bending in closer. Izuku glanced at Mina bewilderedly as she murmured, "Izuku, I think Momo is having her time of the month and from what I know it is a bad one." In order to avoid upsetting Momo by being too close to Izuku, Mina continued, saying, "It is something that happens to us girls. Usually they are mild, but this one is a full-blown big one. Just do not upset her today or for the rest of the week and you will be fine. Oh, and take anything she says with a grain of salt. She is not feeling well and she might lash out at you. She does not mean it." Momo is aware that anything might trigger her, having experienced it herself. On one occasion, Mina recalled screaming at her bigger brother for breathing too forcefully. It was only a brief period of biological madness. Mina could see that it was as she had suspected when they came up to Momo with Izuku. Izuku sat at a desk next to Momo in class and made an effort to comprehend all Mina had said. Then, Mr. Iwaza, who was their homeroom teacher, came into the classroom. The test of quirk apprehension. Izuku started to question how he might use his quirk while wearing the exercise school uniforms that the entire class had changed into. Until Mr. Iwaza moved in closer and saw that Izuku had been tugging at his uniform a little. "Your school exercise uniform has been modified, much like Mount Lady's in that it will stretch and then shrink to accommodate any large animals up to a certain size. Unfortunately this one will not shrink to small animals. But your hero uniform will. Both have an opening that will automatically seal when you go back to being a human. That is so you can have a tail without damaging the uniforms." The instructor shared the news with Izuku. Finding something loose to wear that he could throw aside and change into was challenging. Then look for something to hide behind. After years of mentoring young, aspiring adolescent heroines, Shota Iwaza recognized Momo Yaoyorozu's condition at a glance. In addition, she should have avoided taking the quirk apprehension test. He swiftly scrawled a brief note, just 2 sentences and some scribbles after pulling out his notepad. Recovery Girl would understand the meaning of Code Red. Ensuring that he was seen by all, he looked at every student as he shouted loudly, "I need someone to take this note to the nurse's office." She was given the note and asked, "Miss Yaoyorozu, could you take this note to the nurse's office and wait for a reply?" After complaining, the adolescent bounded away. She gripped and grumbled as she went. After entering the main building, he declared, "All right, let's start the test." Nearly all of them looked at Iwaza with interest, and he was wagering that Toru was as well. Oh, Izuku Midoriya, Kyoka Jiro, Minoru Mineta, Denki Kaminari, Koji Koda, and Toru Hagakure. You all are exempt from these tests. Please wait over there. He couldn't tell, though, because she was invisible. He moved closer to the people he had exempted when the tests were over. He looked at Midoriya and said, "There was no point in having you conduct the tests because your quirks cannot be measured by these tests." The test was then given to the rest of the class. Yours requires you to change into different animals to complete the tests. So under that basis there really is no point in you doing the tests. Since their peculiarities are not based on strength or power, they would run as fast as a regular human could in the dash, and the ball throw, which measures strength, would essentially be the same thing. Author's note. Consider those that I did not take the tests, in contrast to those that did on the show. Momo was walking with the note in her hand, feeling frustrated that she was unable to take the apprehension test. She was determined to blast the distance ball into a fine powder with a bazooka. She located the nurse's office and went inside, where Recovery Girl glanced up from her desk. The little woman said, "Ah, hello there. Can I help you?" And Momo gave her the note. Recovery girl opened it, read the 2 words, and understood right away. Iwaza didn't want to deal with the young woman's emotional state because she was going through her period. Okay, this will take a few minutes. Perhaps you would like a cup of tea while you wait for me to look this up for Mr. Iwaza. Recovery girl responded with a grin, filling a teacup and setting it in front of Momo. She grinned as Momo accepted the tea and started to take a sip from the cup, saying, "This is a herbal blend that is really soothing." In a quiet voice, she said, "And it helps with some of the discomfort you are having." Then feigned searching through her files for the false data. After 2 cups of tea and an hour later, Momo made her way back to the exercise field. She was still a bit annoyed about running the errand, but she felt a little better. Feeling as though time was wasted, she got there right before the test ended. She approached Mr. Iwaza first, gave him the reply letter, and then went to the others. Grunting a response to Izuku and Mina, she went outside at the end of the day and hardly noticed Izuku's appearance. He approached her hesitantly. Izuku calmly stated, "I was thinking, perhaps it would be best that I not come over tonight." Momo gave him a stern look. In fact, she had forgotten that she had wanted him to visit her after school. Yesterday, when she was feeling more like herself, they had made the arrangements. She didn't really care anymore. She was still offended, though, that he refused to return to her home. Momo became enraged when he said, "You look tired and maybe you should get some rest." Momo growled a little and said, "Why not tell the truth? Just because I am in a bad mood, you do not want to be around me. After all, you expect me to always be cheerful and pander to you, right? Fine, don't come over, I don't care." Izuku nodded. Momo raised her hands in the air as Izuku clarified, "That is not it, Momo. I thought because you are not feeling well that you would not want me around." Momo exclaimed, "I said it was fine." Loudly, "I have been there for you since the day we first met, and if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have even thought about coming to the UA," she said, taking a sharp breath and glaring at him. At the conclusion of her outburst, she yelled, "Now that I am not feeling well, you think that I do not want you around? Well, the truth is I don't. I don't want anything to do with you. In fact, I hate you." After giving her a startled look, Izuku closed his eyes and began to decay within. He felt as though Momo had just ripped his heart from his chest. He forgot all Mina had told him. He turned and left without answering. Momo watched him go. He transformed into a hawk and took off, feeling as though he was going to lose it. Mina, who was nearby, heard the entire chat and moved closer, staring at Momo in disbelief. Mina was shocked by what she had just heard and said, "Oh my god, Momo. I know you are having a bit of a hard time this month, but whoa, that was harsh." Momo gave her a somewhat perplexed expression. Momo paused to think, "What, I just told him that?" As tears started to well up in her eyes, she exclaimed, "Oh my god. I just told him that I wanted nothing to do with him and that I hated him. What the fuck is the matter with me?" Mina took a step toward her and put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Momo swiftly took out her phone as Mina said, "I would guess that you just lashed out at him because for a brief moment you were biologically insane. Now dial Chinj to get there. I have to find him. Make sure he knows that I did not mean that. Let's see, he was flying northwest, so he is going home." Momo gasped in agony. Chinj pulled the vehicle just in front of her. Momo was in the backseat before he could exit to open the door. The car drove away after she gave the request, "Take me to Izuku's." Mina gave a headshake. Mina stated to no one, "Well, it seems that she is feeling better." She then proceeded to the train station. Momo no longer felt anything but regret and wanted Chinj to drive more quickly. Not her time messing with her body or her feelings. She just informed the boy she loved that she loathed him, and it was all she could think about. Despite neither of them being ready to express it out, she did love him. However, she was aware that they both sensed it. When she got there, she leapt from the car and dashed into the building. As the elevator carried her to the right floor, she muttered, "Please be here, please be here." She approached the door and prepared to knock. Then paused, just opened the door. It had been unlocked. Since it's Monday, Inko Midoriya would spend an additional hour at the grocery store. The shades were drawn, and the living room was dark. Approaching the light switch. Without emotion, Izuku replied from the room, "I would prefer it dark." Momo could hear the sadness in Izuku's voice as he inquired, "What are you doing here? Plan on repeating that you do not want anything to do with me. That you hate me." His voice was filled with pure desperation as he pleaded, so that I am not confused about that you want to break up with me. He was seated on the floor when she took a tiny flashlight from her arm. The couch behind him, she took a seat beside him on the couch. Momo said softly, Izuku, I did not mean that. I was. I was not feeling well and I lashed out at you without thinking. Having no more feelings except regret, she pleaded, of course I do not hate you. Please look at me. When he did not, she slipped down and took a seat beside him. She placed her right arm behind him and slipped her left around in front of him, saying, Izuku, I am so sorry. I did not mean what I said, I swear I do not hate you and I do want to be with you. You are my boyfriend and you mean everything to me, embracing him in her direction. For a moment, he fought, and she sensed his agonized tremble. She felt her own tears streaming down her cheeks as he sniffed. She put her head on Izuku's shoulder and began to cry, saying, Please Izuku, forgive me. Izuku put his right arm in front of her and his left around her back, saying, Please. She melted against him as he held her tighter. It is okay. Mina warned me that you might be a little off today and for the rest of the week. But to hear you say that you hated me, it just sounded like you meant it. I felt devastated, Izuku whispered to her as she sniffled, drawing him in. Momo firmly said, Never, I never meant that. I couldn't hate you, not ever. She felt so much better with him holding her. Her time was no longer having such a strong impact on her. After a short while, Izuku laughed as she murmured, Do you think we can get off the floor? I think I am sitting on one of the couch legs and it is really uncomfortable. Then gave a nod. They both rose from the floor and took seats on the couch. She grabbed his left arm, wrapped it around herself, and slipped behind him. She shifted to the left to surround him. She put her feet up on the couch and rested her head on his chest, right below his shoulder. She gazed up at him, more at ease now. She said, Put your left arm around me and hold me. She closed her eyes when he did. She slept off before he could question her. She was exhausted, and he had been right. Izuku and Momo were asleep on the couch when Inko returned home an hour later and turned on the light. She took a throw close by and covered them, not wanting to wake them. She took up her phone and contacted Momo's mother, telling the more sensible parent that Momo would be staying the night and not to worry, and turned the light back off. To ensure they behaved, she would watch over them all night. It was almost midnight when Izuku woke up and glanced down at Momo's face. He tried to loosen her hold on him gently, but she was grinning strangely contentedly. She shifted. Momo, half sleepy, murmured, MMMPH, where do you think you are going? Izuku shook her head and muttered back, I was going to go to my room so you can lie down and get some sleep. She tightened her hold on him. Izuku lay down with Momo slightly on top of him after making a few small changes. Momo whispered back, No. I want you here. We can move to lie down, but I want you with me in my arms and me in yours. Her arms were now firmly wrapped around him, and her head was now resting on the right side of his chest. Pulling the throw over them again, she fell back asleep in a matter of seconds, and Izuku was unable to keep his own eyes open. Falling asleep right away, Momo woke up after a few hours and turned to face Izuku. She knew he wouldn't, and he hadn't even attempted to touch her inappropriately by accident. Far from touching her breasts, ass, or even her femininity, his hand and arms were wrapped around her. As she looked lovingly at him, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed by her words today. She could never dislike him since she had been honest. Fucking time of the month. You almost cost me the best thing to ever happen to me. She was thinking. She smiled a little, cuddled up to him, and quickly went back to sleep. A hand stroked Dawn's shoulder close by, then moved. The voice of Inko murmured softly, Momo, Izuku, you both need to wake up. You have school in 2 hours. The hand came back and gave her a gentle shake, saying, Come on, wake up. Momo opened her eyes, grinned, and yawned. Izuku stood up and went to the restroom. Then Momo yawned once more. You are a lot better than my alarm clocks. Though usually I end up smashing the things out of anger. She opened her eyes, startled. She said, You let us sleep together on the couch. And Inko gave her a shrug. Inko grinned and said, I knew you two would not do anything and you looked like you needed him to comfort you. Oh, I check almost every hour to make sure you two did not do anything. It was the only way I could get your mother to agree to letting you sleep over. Do me a favor, do not tell her that you two slept on the couch together. I sort of implied that you were going to sleep on the couch while he slept in his room. With that, Inko headed to the kitchen to prepare a meal. Izuku came back, and Momo went to the restroom. She needs to urinate after finishing. After taking off her clothes, she started to make a precise replica of the school uniform. In addition to a bra, panties, and socks, her final creations were 4 brand new maxi pads. Even so, she felt fantastic. She showered, got dressed, and left. Izuku ate a substantial breakfast while taking a shower. Momo grinned at the elder Midoriya as Inko remarked, "Do you feel better this morning, dear?" Momo responded, biting into a bagel and munching contentedly, "Yes. A lot better than I did yesterday. I guess the hit me really hard yesterday. Today I feel great and back to normal." Momo had to agree with Inko when she remarked, "Sometimes all you need to do is get a good night's rest." It had been a while since she had slept well. She would not mind cuddling with Izuku more frequently because it felt so good to do so last night. Izuku was dressed for school when he got back. Momo sat down, grinned at him, and was eager to spend some time with him alone. Now that she felt more like herself than the insanely nasty side she would never again unleash on him, she desperately wanted to kiss him. With his usual pomp and circumstance, All Might declared as he entered the A-1 homeroom class. He said, grinning widely at the first-year pupils, "I am here." Since this was his first time teaching, he made an effort to recall his duties. The future generation should be taught how to be heroes. He went to wait for the young teenagers to reach the designated area after telling them to change into their uniforms. He was a little anxious about how he would actually instruct them. Momo took out her hero uniform in the girls' locker room. I winced a little at how sparse it was. Mina put out her own and said, "Something wrong, Momo?" After glancing at the form-fitting uniform, the acid quirker realized that this was not what she had been searching for. Momo slipped into the skimpy uniform and said, "Oh, nothing really drastic, other than I have seen hookers in the red light district wear more than this." She complained that it hardly covered her, saying, "Shit, if I am not careful, my breasts will pop right out of this. That and anyone who wants can get a good look at my ass." If Izuku saw her in this, she wouldn't mind, but not the others. Particularly Minoru Mineta, that little pervert. Yes, she was aware of him. In fact, the internet had warned her about him. She saw the boys give her a number of snarling looks and her boyfriend give her a worried look as she followed the others out of the locker room. Izuku pondered how the light blue material, which seemed so fragile, would behave when he transformed into an animal and either stretch or reduce when he slipped into the incredibly tight uniform. The Brontosaurus was considerably smaller than any of the new ones he had added for his own purposes. Specifically, 1. The Megadon. Because the DNA was still present, Professor Henderson was able to locate an ancient tooth belonging to the enormous predator. At this point, Izuku may transform into the 50-foot, more than 1-ton super-sized shark. Izuku realized that the only way he could utilize it was if the water was deep enough for him to swim. He therefore made the decision not to even try, unless there was an extreme circumstance involving deep water. It was another apex predator class, but this one was a dinosaur he had never heard of. The Seots Microorum, with its long snot and sharp, lethal teeth in its forearms. Once more from the third Jurassic Park film, Momo showed him one or a respectable depiction of one. It weighed twice as much as the T-Rex and was at least twice as big. 40 tons of sheer brute force. Izuku pondered why it had a sail-shaped fan on its back as he changed into it. However, he made the decision not to question Henderson for fear of receiving a 3-hour lecture about it. As a result, another issue arose. This dinosaur was simply too large unless there was enough of space. The size made it challenging to maneuver in crowded spaces, much like the Brontosaurus. Izuku therefore made the decision to mostly stick to the 3 that appeared to be the most successful. The Stegosaurus, Triceratops, and Raptors. They could be used practically anyplace because they were all sufficiently small and strong. In addition to the several animals that were still alive, he spent some time talking to most of them when he and Momo visited the zoo on the weekends. I thought it was intriguing that some animals were more intellectual the older they were. In that sense, very much like people. He halted and gaped as he followed the others out of the classroom to the exercise area. Every boy in the class stared at Momo because of what he was wearing. He was a little worried that she would attract more attention if she wore that clothing. She already attracted a lot of attention, and the fact that her uniform was so small would further increase it. As he gazed at Momo, Minoru Mineta exclaimed, salivating a little, wow. Minoru gave her a big smile and glanced up and down before doing it again. Izuku leaned down and took a step toward the shorter lad. Minoru stared up at Izuku as he menacingly murmured, if I ever catch you trying anything perverted with Momo, I will transform into a Tyrannosaurus Rex and eat you. Then shuddered a little since he didn't like the way Izuku was staring at him. With a nod, the small pervert turned to leave. Izuku grinned and shook his head. He didn't like the way Minoru was staring at Momo, even though it had been a hollow threat. Being aware that Minoru would eventually attempt to view Momo or any of the other girls in the class nude. The teachers hoped to somehow stop Minoru's obscene behavior because they were fully aware of his twisted past. Momo told Izuku that she had the ideal remedy, which was castration. Naturally, it came after she first saw the teeny pervert attempting to use a tiny mirror to look up her and Mina's school uniform skirts. Momo took a step closer and shrugged, revealing her large chest as her uniform stretched. Well, you look interesting. Izuku frowned as he said. Momo stated in a low voice that only Izuku could hear, I look like a hooker in this. She stared at him and wrinkled her nose before adding, though they might have designed this so I can fully access my quirk. His cheeks flushed as she said, yours seem a little tight. I hope it actually stretches or you are going to be in trouble. I take it no underwear. Then they noticed Mina adjusting her costume. Momo said, something wrong Mina. And Mina winced. Mina said, her face going a light lilac as she pointed down. The colors on this thing is really outrageous. Thankfully the front is not as open as yours as Momo. But it still lets everyone see my cleavage and it is also so tight that I am worried that I may show a camel toe. Mina looked at Izuku, wondering if he knew, but his face was a hot red. Tell me something, Momo, some of the boys' costumes are perfectly conventional. Why is it that for us girls, it is either perfectly functional like Kyoka's or it is so trashy that we look strippers? Mina asked. Shoto Todoroki listened and knew the solution. 6 cells. For the costume creators they believe that the 6 wider you look the more attention you will receive. Look at Midnight in the past or present and Mount Lady. Both have a very large fan base that only are fans due to that those two dress inappropriately as possible. Shoto said before walking over to the others. Momo shook her head, looking down at herself. Izuku was unsure of how to respond when Momo smiled at him. Well, I still do not like it. Momo went closer to Mina and whispered to her companion, I had planned for the only one that would ever see this much of me as Izuku. This was not her typical smile, there was a hint of mischief about it. Izuku transformed into a Siberian tiger within the mock building, choosing not to even attempt something more ambitious. For starters, he might need to move fast because the hallways were too confined. Ochako Uraraka walked beside him, exhausted. She asked in a trembling voice, not quite accustomed to being this close to a tiger, so have any idea how to win this? Particularly one that speaks. Izuku growled, you find the bomb, I will keep Kachan and Tenya Iida occupied. She was more than glad to do just that. Glancing back to make sure he wasn't following her, she turned down one of the other corridors. Izuku turned down another hallway and grinned broadly when he saw the breaker box. He tore the box from the wall and transformed into a silverback gorilla. After blinking, the lights all went out. He transformed back into a tiger and slipped stealthily down the now dark corridor, searching for Iida and Kachan. Ochako's voice asked from the earwig in Izuku's cat ear, what happened? Izuku responded, I destroyed the lights. I will give me an advantage over them. He then started to track down the two using his tiger senses. He could just make out where Iida was whispering to himself, and he could actually smell Kachan. In addition, she could hear Ochako stealthily moving in the direction of where she thought the bomb and Iida could be. Izuku's only task now was to prevent Kachan from encroaching on her from behind. He would need to infuriate his irate former friend even more in order to accomplish that. Izuku no longer had to smell Kachan's location after a short while. He was audible. The angry voice yelled, what the fuck happened to the lights? I can't see shit. Fucking fuck and crap. Just before Izuku heard a tiny explosion. Die you bastard. Izuku grinned widely as there was another, bigger explosion. His former friend was already growing more irate, and it wouldn't take much to stoke the animosity to the point where the other would lose all self-control. He transformed into a typical cat and silently slipped along the hallway. Getting close to the angry Kachan. By whom was everything that created noise being blasted? He spun around and let out a blast as he heard water dripping from a nearby pipe. The hallway briefly illuminated before going dark again. Izuku shifted into a dark-colored German Shepherd and approached. He moved up next to Kachan and raised his leg, grinning like a dog. Urinating on it, he transformed into a cheetah and fled before Kachan could react. Feeling the moisture on his leg, Kachan said, "What the fuck?" Before becoming furious, he yelled, "Motherfucker! You pissed on my leg," and fired 3 blasts in quick succession after the now departing Izuku. Still yelling in unrestrained rage, running for Izuku. Orchiko heard the blasts just outside the bomb chamber and became a little concerned about her colleague. He would get Katsuki Bakugo to pursue him, but it was all part of the plan. When they won, she would attempt to touch the bomb. Tenya Iida did not leave the room, which was the issue. Even after Katsuki, now enraged, insisted that Iida accompany him in his hunt for Izuku. She was so preoccupied with figuring out how to enter the room and finish the work that she was unaware of a black and white cat joining her. The little cat meowed, and Orchiko couldn't resist giving him a quick pet. Okay, got him mad. Izuku meowed and she withdrew her hand, saying, "Don't let Momo see you do that, she is the jealous type." Orchiko muttered, "So what do we do now?" Tenya Iida is not going to leave the room. Izuku moved to stand in front of her. Orhako looked down at Izuku as he said, "This is going to sound mean, but I want you to pick me up and throw me at him." Orchiko shook her head vehemently and murmured, "No way. I am not going to throw a kitty cat. It is animal abuse." Izuku looked up at her and meowed in laughter. Izuku reassured her, "Orchiko, I am not a real cat, so it is not abuse. Do not worry, I won't stay a cat very long. Now after you throw me, get to the bomb." Orchiko unwillingly took up the little cat since she didn't enjoy the thought of dealing so cruelly with such a cute cat. Then she grimaced and threw the cat as hard as she could. It hissed and transformed into a 15 to 18-foot anaconda as it flew toward Iida. Iida let out a startled squeak as Orchiko gazed at the abrupt change for a few moments. It roused her from her reverie. She propelled herself in the direction of the fake bomb after touching herself and floating. Izuku, the big snake, encircled Iida in the meantime. Izuku growled as he slithered out close to Iida's helmet, saying, "Got you." Orchiko snatched up the explosives and gave her a hug. Then grinned down at the big snake, "Izuku. Heroes win." All Might's voice roared through the mock building speakers. Katsuki's angry screams could be heard by the 3 down the corridors. Using some extremely offensive profanity that I, as the author, am hesitant to use at all. Katsuki went outside to wash the dog poop off his leg using a nearby water hose. A slight sneer appeared on one side of his face as he gazed at Izuku. The side that was hidden from view. With a hint of jealousy, he thought, "Funny Deku. Very funny." Recalling the day he had made fun of Deku, he held back his laughter and kept washing the pee off. "What are you going to do, change into a dog and piss on a villain's leg?" he asked. Izuku gave Momo a big smile as she remarked, "How did you get Kachan to get so out of control? I mean, he was already angry. But you sent him into a psychotic rage." Making sure no one else could hear him, he looked around. Izuku murmured, "I changed into a dog and pissed on his leg." Momo covered her mouth with her hands. She was furiously laughing while trying to contain her laughter. The other people would want to know what was so funny if they heard her. Momo exclaimed, "Izuku," with the intention of reprimanding him while simultaneously praising his actions. After she finally managed to restrain herself, she felt compelled to kiss her boyfriend, saying, "No wonder he looks like he wants to kill you." She made a mental point to kiss him as soon as they left the campus, whispering, "This sucks, I want to kiss you so badly right now, if I do, we both get into trouble." She was a little miffed that she would be playing a villain when it was her turn, and she was much more miffed when she was teamed with Minoru Mineta. I had a sneaking suspicion that the tiny pervert would eventually stare at her breast, ass, and most likely anything else, despite Izuku's fictitious threat to devour him. Drool was streaming down his chin as she caught him examining her 3 times. According to her, fucking pervert. Momo leapt into Izuku's arms and gave him a passionate kiss as they left the UA campus. She usually made an effort to fulfill her commitments, and she had promised herself that she would do that as soon as they left the school grounds. Mina patiently awaited the couple's completion. They all made the decision to visit a brand new fast food restaurant that had recently opened close by. A Dairy Queen, I believe. They walked because it wasn't that far. Momo's fingers were tightly entwined with Izuku's as she gripped his hand. She desired another night like last night, but it was nice to hold his hand, where she was able to sleep with him, his arms wrapped about her, and her head resting on him. However, she was aware that would need to wait till the appropriate moment. She didn't think his mother, Inko, would let them do that next time. With a tiny wrinkle in her nose, Mina remarked, "So what do you two think of All Might teaching us?" "Well, he seems to know what he is doing. Though I expected a little more knowledge about his fighting styles and tactics." Momo responded. It's likely that everyone in the class had the same thought. With all of All Might's experience, they expected him to teach them in a different way because he was the world's most popular hero. Maybe share a few of his hero experiences. Izuku responded, "I am just thrilled to have him as a teacher." Momo laughed briefly. With a broad sneer, Momo said, "Izuku is a serious fanboy. I bet within a week, he is going to ask All Might for an autograph." Mina laughed. She then made the decision to refrain from making fun of him too much because she was still feeling bad about what she had said to him the day before. She drew him in and gave him a cheek kiss. She grinned at him, and he grinned back, saying, "I was just teasing you a little. I like that you are a fanboy. It gives you character and I think it is cute. Just like I think you are cute." Mina frowned slightly and remarked, "Oh, will you two stop the lovey-dovey stuff? I still haven't found a decent boy in school to date yet." She had reduced it to 3 boys, which was not totally accurate. Honto Shiro, Mezzo Shoji, and Shoto Todoroki. Tenya Iida had been on her mind for a moment. However, he appeared to take the position far too seriously after being elected class rep. With a broad smile, Mina pointed to the new location and said, "Ah, there it is, Dairy Queen." Unexpected simulation partnership. Class 1A approached the enormous dome while wearing their hero uniforms once more. Momo was eager to train here since she had read everything there was to know about it. She grinned as she looked lovingly at the large blue doors. As he tightened his uniform around his collar, Izuku remarked, "You seem a little happy today." Wearing something that was essentially a second skin was still unfamiliar to him. Momo then started telling him everything he needed to know about the 6 primary zones and the domes inside. The fact that 13 was leading the training was what truly excited her. Similar to Izuku's respect for All Might, it was Momo's for 13. Izuku started to look around as Shoto Todoroki remarked, "I thought All Might was going to be here." Back in homeroom, Mr. Iwasa had told them that. The doors opened as they approached the main entrance, giving the students their first up-close look at the training dome's interior. At least twice the size of an American football stadium, it was enormous. The proposal was straightforward and had the backing of those who were fed up with the current situation. Tamura Shigoraki was aware that the symbol of peace will be destroyed this time. All power. Kurogiri, the 47 other people, and the Nomu were all prepared. He just needed to say it, and Kurogiri would take them all into the training unforeseen simulation joint, where All Might would ultimately perish. He glanced at his shadowy flowing companion and smiled slightly. Tamura declared, "It is time," and stepped into the shadows. Izuku felt himself suddenly plummet into the fake lagoon. After he and a few of the others were swallowed up by some kind of shadow, they left the entrance. He knew right away that none of his sea-type animals would work as soon as he entered the sea. It wasn't seawater, it was fresh water. When Izuku saw the villains coming, he transformed into a 12-foot alligator and swung his tail to get away from them. He pushed his hard nose into one of the villains as he swam for the 2 other members of the class who were also in the water. Removing the man from Minoru Mineta and Tsuyu Asui, Izuku snarled, "Get on." Tsuyu reluctantly threw Minoru onto the alligator's back before joining the smaller lad. As she struggled to overcome her frog-like nature and its innate fear of predators, she was panting heavily. However, she managed that dread since she knew it was Izuku Midoriya. He swam quickly for the fake yacht that was positioned in the center of the pool with another swish of his strong alligator tail. She leapt to grab Minoru and looked back at Izuku, who transformed into a silver-backed gorilla and scaled the ship's side. He transformed back into a human once he was securely on deck. They both shrugged as he said, "Anyone have any idea what is going on?" He prayed Momo was safe as he looked out at the other training zones, wishing to transform into a pterodactyl or hawk to protect her. However, doing so would entail leaving Tsuyu and Minoru to the villains who have collected in the water surrounding them. Tsuyu questioned, "Not a clue. Where did all these villains come from?" Izuku was clueless. Momo took a long metal bar from her chest and created another to give to Kyoka, keeping her back to the fake boulders. They were essentially surrounded by the dozen or so baddies that Denki was hurling little charges of electricity at. Her first thought was for Izuku, and she brandished the bar menacingly. She was aware that her boyfriend was likely in some severe difficulty right now and would not back down from any of these villains. It's not that her current situation wasn't risky, but she didn't want to consider the worst-case scenario that would befall her and Kyoka. Denki was a different story. If they didn't protect themselves, he would most likely suffer severe injuries. She could tell exactly what the villains planned to do to her and the young girl standing next to her based on the stares she and Kyoka were getting. Kyoka's voice was tight with terror as she questioned, "They intend to rape us?" Momo nodded and let out a breath. Kyoka gave Momo a slight smile in response to her statement, "Yes. But I for one am not going down without a fight. I expect to cripple at least half of them before they get me. How about you?" "That works for me. You cripple one half, I will castrate the other half," Kyoka replied with determination. She was prepared to protect herself from people who would do the worst thing to a young woman who didn't want it. Beside them, Denki had backed off. "I didn't hear what they had just said." Momo gave Denki a snide smile in response to his question, "So what do we do?" Momo raised the bar higher and said, "We kick their asses so badly that they wished they never came here." Izuku was standing at the rail, having made a plan. He didn't tell them that he didn't think he could fly very far carrying both of them, even as something as large as a pterodactyl. "Once I change into a brontosaurus you need to jump away as high as you can. I will try to catch you if need be as a pterodactyl." He found that the prehistoric avian dinosaur glided rather than flew. He didn't want to deter either of them, though, particularly when Minoru Mineta appeared to be about to urinate. He nodded and sprang, growing into a 4-ton brontosaurus in full size. It struck the water, pushing and dislodging the villains. Then, after giving it some thought, Izuku transformed into a hawk and soared up to join Tsuyu as she leapt to great heights. After transforming into a pterodactyl, he seized them and attempted to glide in the direction of shore. Minoru emerged from his reverie and started hurling his gooey balls at the villains, following the most of them collectively. Izuku transformed into his human form before colliding with the sandy shore, and all three of them landed with relative ease. He thought about changing into something to lessen the impact, but ultimately determined that doing so might cause him to crush Minoru or Tsuyu. He dusted the sand from his face as he stood. Tsuyu nodded as he asked, "Are you two all right?" "Good, let's get back to the entrance." Finding Momo and making sure she was okay was the first and most important thing Izuku wanted to do. He could sense, however, that it was more crucial that he or one of the others go outside and sound the alarm, disregarding Minoru Mineta's pitiful cries for a place to hide. The decision was made to proceed to the main entrance. Knowing that Izuku could transform into different flying creatures, Tsuyu stated, "I think we all should stay low and not draw attention to ourselves. However, that would attract the villains' attention and most likely result in some kind of fire." Izuku changed into a tiger and remarked calmly, "I guess that is a good idea." They headed for the entrance with the two others following, and as they got closer, they heard the sound of a fierce struggle. Tsuyu and Minoru crept closer, slipping into the water to gain a better look. He joined them after changing back into the alligator, observing Mr. Iwaza battle a monster of some kind. As she observed the monstrous thing beating on Eraserhead and shattering their instructors' bones, Tsuyu questioned, "What do we do?" Izuku stiffened, staring at the spectacle. He started to grow before anyone could stop him, and now he roared like a T-Rex, stomping in the direction of the beast. He struck the monster with his wide head, knocking it back. Tamura Shigoraki initially gaped in disbelief at the unexpected sight of a real dinosaur crashing into his Nomu, destroying the final remedy for All Might's demise. He shook his head and smiled vindictively. Nothing, not even All Might, could defeat Nomu. Tamura commanded, "Nomu, get rid of that thing." Nomu shoved the dinosaur away with great force. To Tamura's surprise, it transformed into a rhino after landing a few meters away and then crashed into Nomu once more. "The League of Villains," Commander calmly remarked. "Ah, now I understand, it is that one that can take the form of any animal." Izuku knew that the dark monster was far more powerful than anything he could transform into, so he ran toward it at full rhino speed. Not even the massive apex predator dinosaur could hold the creature at bay for very long. Izuku transformed into a cheetah and jumped back before the monster called Nomu could strike him, effortlessly avoiding the attack. He slid back, then sensed a presence behind him. Looking over his shoulder, a voice muttered, "Time to die, wannabe hero." Izuku noticed the person wearing a mask that resembled a hand. Izuku transformed into something terrible with a tiny smile. He raised the tail of the new animal and let it run wild. After that, it transformed into a normal cat and ran before turning back into a raptor and spinning. I'm relieved that the predator dinosaur's olfactory gland was different, because the stench was overpowering. Others covered their mouths and noses with their hands when they started coughing, retreating from their leader. Tamura didn't know what the little animal was going to do when it raised its tail. It wasn't something he recognized, after all. He opened his mouth to gloat, but the little black and white animal blasted him with some kind of liquid. He gagged as some of the vile liquid entered his mouth due to the overwhelming stench. Squeezing his eyes tight, he tore off his mask. He tried to get the taste out of his mouth by bending over and throwing up. Around him, laughter broke out, and he realized it was coming from both the would-be heroes and those who accompanied him. His words were, "Shut up. If I discover WHO is laughing at me, I will kill you." He took a breath and wished he hadn't. He threw up again, but this time it came from his nose. Tamura yelled, "Nomu, kill the one that dared do this to me." And then coughed once more. Breathing became difficult as he attempted to remove the foul odor from his mouth and face. Izuku, standing a few meters away, could not contain his laughter. He stayed as a velociraptor, watching the Nomu creature wearily. He was aware that his best option was to avoid the monster until someone who could confront it showed up. I'm hoping All Might will show up shortly. In order to safeguard Kyoka and herself, Momo focused on making a mesh material that was several times thicker across the root. The top of her uniform was torn as soon as the idea she had devised exploded out of her back. Denki's electrified quirk power came into play. She and Kyoka were protected from the electricity explosion, which startled everyone nearby, by the mesh. Kyoka drew the mesh in front of Momo so Denki couldn't see her nude chest and exclaimed, "Hey, your breasts are out." Pulling out a matching top from her uniform, Momo retorted, "It's okay, I'll make a replacement." Instead, she was tempted to design a t-shirt to lessen her exposure. Sadly, Denki's brain short circuit was not the only thing brought on by the electrical surge. However, one of the villains had managed to avoid the consequences. Denki Kaminari was grabbed by the throat. The villain grinned widely and remarked, "Nice try." He scowled at Momo and said, "Now you have a choice, let me kill this one or surrender." Momo swallowed her fear and attempted to think of a method to save Denki and prevent the sadistic villain from raping her and Kyoka. "Then you and me bitches are going to have some real fun." I couldn't think of anything. Izuku quickly learned that the Nomu was both swift and powerful after jumping to one side to avoid a strike. He transformed into a stegosaurus and slammed his spiked tail into the creature as the blow smashed into the earth close to him. He used 3 of his spikes to impale it. Izuku flung the Nomu away and saw the creature stand again as the holes closed. Izuku could conceive of no other animal that could possibly compete with Nomu, and it was incapable of doing anything on dry land. Since it wasn't seawater, the water was also out. Izuku struggled to come up with a strategy as Nomu stalked in his direction. I couldn't think of anything. A loud voice behind him stated, "I am here." Izuku turned slightly and let out a sigh of relief. All Might was here. As he landed close by, All Might waved his hand in front of his face and exclaimed, "Phew, what smells so badly?" Izuku transformed into a hawk and swooped out of the way, wishing to avoid interfering with All Might and the creature Nomu. Observing the altercation, which escalated into a full-fledged fight, Izuku started to believe that he needed to keep discovering new animal variants. He now realizes that he had not found enough, even if he had believed he had. Particularly when confronted with various situations where it would be prudent to have a variety of animals. The altercation was about done when the other teachers showed there. Regretfully, the shadowy quirker that had brought the villains into the dome allowed the leader, who now had such a foul odor that nobody wanted to be within 10 feet of him, to flee. He transformed back into his typical human self and flew down. With their hands raised in front of their faces, Shoto and Katsuki took a step closer, attempting to dispel the terrible stench that seemed to be persistent. Katsuki covered his mouth and nose with his palm and questioned, "What the fuck is that smell?" Izuku looked around and declared, "That would be skunk oil, Kachan. I nailed their leader with it." The remaining villains were essentially being forced to surrender by the teachers. As he left, Katsuki started to laugh softly. "If we ever face each other again, Deku, do not ever do that to me." If you do I will kill you. Thinking it was hilarious that a skunk sprayed the League of Villains, jerk leader. Izuku kept scanning the area because he had to make sure Momo was okay. Observing her approaching him with Kyoka, nearly pulling Denki with her. Izuku let out a sigh of relief. They both smiled and nodded simultaneously as they asked, "Are you all right?" Disregarding whether she or he went into trouble. Izuku encircled Momo with his arms and gave her a firm embrace. Not particularly concerned with the restrictions at the time, Momo whispered to him, "Izuku, we shouldn't, it is against the rules." Momo giggled as Izuku murmured back, "Fuck the rules." Despite their critical glances, some of the teachers judged that it was not urgent enough to enforce the regulations at this time. The fact that so many villains were able to enter the UA campus grounds and attack the students as well as teachers Iwasa and 13 was extremely significant. Everyone was a little taken aback by Mr. Iwasa's presence when they arrived for class the following day. Momo looked at Izuku and suppressed a yawn. They had been chatting on the computer via video chat for the majority of the night. She hadn't explained to him what might have happened if Kyoka and she had been taken prisoner by the villains, not wanting him to get overly protective and anxious. At first, she wasn't really listening, but when he brought up the sports festival, her attention was drawn back to Iwasa. She grinned at Izuku, perking up, who was also grinning, following class. Mother smiled broadly and said, "A whole week to prepare and train." Izuku agreed as she asked, "Do you want to come to my house and train there with me?" Mina thought for a bit, "How about you, Mina? There is plenty of room and there is also a fully equipped gymnasium." Momo shook her head when Mina said, "Are you sure? I would think that you two would want some alone time together. If you know what I mean. Not during the day, I expect that we all need to train and get ready." "Oh, I am planning on spending a lot of alone time with him after training. I was thinking of starting about 9 a.m. every day. Sound good to you?" Momo said with a nod. She was tempted to invite Mina to accompany him, but she decided that this was meant to be a date and that she wanted to go for a pleasant walk on the beach with him after dinner. "Good see you tomorrow, Mina. Izuku and I have to go to his place for dinner with his mother." Mina left without even being disappointed that she had not received an invitation to Izuku's dinner, saying, "Okay, see you both then," being aware that it was a date and a chance for them to spend time together. Instruction. It took about 40 minutes to reach a station close to Momo's address. Mina glanced at the various mansions that lined the street as she went. Izuku approached her to join her, but she didn't notice. She was quite startled when Izuku said, "It is at the end of the street." Before turning to look at Izuku, Mina remarked, "Geez, these houses are huge." He winced as he glanced at his watch. As Izuku transformed into a dark brown horse, he said, "Crap. Okay, time to cheat." One of her eyebrows shot up in perplexity as he whinnied, "Get on. The main gate is right there, but the house is a good distance from the gate. At the pace we are walking it would take us a good hour to arrive. Momo hates it when I am late," he said. She climbed up on his back with a big smile, and he cantered along at a good clip. She held onto the long hair on the horse's neck. Mina clutched the hair in her hands and pleaded, "Please take it easy, I've never been on a horse before." She grinned widely as he trotted ahead, despite her slight nervousness. It took 5 minutes or so to get to the gate, and he used his long nose to press the call button. Izuku whinnied and the gate opened, saying, "Momo, it's us." He trotted toward the house, and Mina saw now what he meant by far distance. The front of the house was at least half a mile away. They only had roughly 15 minutes until it was 9 in the morning, and it would take at least 30 minutes to get there at average foot speed. After 10 minutes, he approached the front step in a trot. Momo's arms were folded across her chest as she waited. She recognized the horse as Izuku as she glanced up at Mina. Mina jumped down and then frowned, saying, Don't be jealous, Momo." Izuku figured that unless he do this we would be late. She reached back and started massaging her thighs and ass. She tried to rub the pangs away by biting her lower lip and saying, "Ow, be thankful you never did that, my butt is killing me." Momo burst out laughing. "I was feeling a little upset that you just rode my boyfriend. But I guess you getting saddle sore is the best punishment I could think of." Momo replied with a grin. Then, as Izuku transformed back into a person, she pointed her right index finger at him. Izuku looked at her in disbelief as she said, "No more horsing around." She adamantly said, "I know that was a horrible pun. But I mean it, no more of that ever. Okay, let's get to work." Momo nodded sympathetically when Izuku stated, the first thing I want to do is go to the room of death and incorporate every animal there. I need more variety in the ones I change into. They were going to a marine aquarium later on a date. The zoo tomorrow evening. Momo led Mina to the gymnasium after he departed. Both of them desired to work out effectively, putting on tight workout attire, such as a sports top. Momo boarded the treadmill as Mina went to one of the exercise bikes. Momo glanced at Mina while jogging on the treadmill at a pleasant, brisk speed. Mina, I was not really upset or even jealous that you were riding on Izuku when he was a horse. It was just so he knows that I care enough to be jealous or upset. I like the idea that he knows that I am the jealous type. Momo clarified as she accelerated. Because her ass still ached after being on Izuku's back, Mina was still having some issues. I now see why people wore saddles instead of riding horses bareback. Oh, like when Orchiko Uraraka told you that she unintentionally petted Izuku when he was a cat during that mock training in the building. You told her that it was alright. Even though Izuku told Orchiko you were the jealous type. Mina inquired and Momo laughed. Mina glanced at Momo bewilderedly as she answered, exactly. Though I do get jealous. I have no intention of having anyone take him away from me. Sorry, but that includes you. Actually, to tell the truth, you are the only one that really concerns me. Momo laughed as Mina confessed, why? I told you that I would not do that. But the second you two break up, I plan on consoling him. That is not the reason I am concerned. The fact is that if we ever do break up, I doubt that any of us could be friends anymore if you did get with him. I am the vindictive type also and would be extremely angry that you basically slipped in and took my place in his heart. Momo admitted and then observed Izuku enter the big open space. Mina completely grasped her suggestion. Let's table this discussion when he is not around. I do not want him to know about it. For starters, if he and Momo ever split up, he would be quite uncomfortable to find out that they were discussing it. He nodded when she said, so were you able to fully incorporate all the animals in the library? Izuku said, hoping he wouldn't upset Momo, yes. From the American red-tailed fox to the African leopard. You know your grandfather was a psychotic murderer. He was a little saddened by the sheer number of the poor animals that had been slaughtered, stuffed, and mounted as trophies. He moved to a corner, took a seat, and started thinking about how he could use each one. In the meantime, Momo and Mina discussed a variety of topics, primarily the forthcoming sports festival. Momo observed Izuku transform into a variety of aquatic animals on the beach. She took a pair of binoculars from her stomach and grinned broadly when he transformed into a dolphin and she was sufficiently deep out to no longer require them. He became a massive megalodon shark. Many in the vicinity gasped and pointed. Some people are going crazy. She told a police officer who was going to call the shore patrol, it's okay. That's just my boyfriend. His quirk allows him to change into various animals. Izuku shrank to a great white shark and then a stingray as it approached land. A big sea lion appeared as he got closer to land. He went back to being human and waddled onto shore. She grinned at him and took a step closer. Leaning in, I said, that was great. The policeman approached and said, you scared some people around here by changing into that megalodon. Izuku immediately apologized after the cop said, son, I suggest that you do not ever become that big shark again in public. It really startled a lot of bystanders. When things were back to normal, he and Momo went for a walk on the beach, putting hands together. Momo, who was exhausted and wanted to feel him support her through the night, asked, Izuku, do you think that your mother would allow me to stay over tonight? Izuku sighed and wrinkled his nose. Knowing Momo, Izuku acknowledged, you want my mother to call yours and tell her you are staying over. I do not think she would really want to do that. He had a suspicion that she was planning to avoid asking Inko's approval. She would likely fall asleep with only a simple snuggle against him. Both were suffering from the exhaustion of a long day. Momo said, shall we head back and instead watch some TV? And the two walked over to his apartment building. Momo started her cunning little plot to spend the night in the living room. With her feet and legs on the couch, she nestled into him as he wrapped his right arm over her. She put her own right arm in front of him and her left arm behind him, resting her head securely on his chest. Sitting on a nearby chair, Inko Midoriya glanced over and grinned. That Izuku and Momo appeared to believe they were attempting to do something nefarious to her struck me as quite adorable. She was sound asleep before the news aired. She slept with a satisfied smile. After a few minutes, Izuku looked down and let out a breath. Izuku said, just loud enough for his mother to hear, Mom, she fell asleep. Inko rolled her eyes and shook her head. I suspected she would. Tomorrow tell her next time ask permission and not try something so underhanded. I would have let her stay the night Izuku. So there was no need to be so devious. Inko said with a harsh look at him, observing Momo's nose wrinkle. She stood up and laughed, saying, pretending to sleep won't work dear, and I know you heard me. If you two promise to behave, I will call her mother and tell her that you fell asleep on the couch again. Also I will allow you two to sleep in his bed instead of the couch. As long as the door stays open and there is no hanky-panky at all. Momo looked up with a grin. Izuku nodded in agreement as Momo said, sorry Inko, I just need to stay the night with him. We both promise no misbehaving at all. Right Izuku? Inko waved them away and proceeded to her own bedroom, saying, I completely understand Momo. Truth be told, I like having you here. Okay. Then go on and go to bed. I will call your mother in a bit. Since the door essentially glanced into his room, he kept it open. They were aware that she would be watching them rather intently all night. Tamura Shigoraki stood beneath the water's flow, scrubbed frantically. He had taken 3 showers since returning. In a futile attempt to wash the taste from his mouth, he was gargling bottle after bottle of mouthwash at the same time. He cleaned himself once more, pouring another handful of soap into his fingers. He ducked under the water and said, fucking son of a bitch. I ever get my hands on him, he will die. Before emerging, so Kurogiri do I still smell? He said of his enemy. He could only detect that dreadful scent. The shadow gave a nod. Shit, he said, ducking back into the mist. Kurogiri handed Tamura a can of tomato juice and added, I looked it up, it says to fully remove the skunk oil it is advisable to use tomato juice. Choosing to keep the younger man in the dark about the fact that the skunk oil was actually pee. Given that some of it got in his mouth, he wasn't sure his young colleague could take hearing that. Tamura took the juice and doused him with it, squirming at the scent of tomato and skunk together. Tamura waved to the internet and said, I swear I will kill that kid. Just because of the humiliation he caused me to do so. A video on YouTube was halted. A black and white skunk was seen spraying him in the released video. The fact that one of his own trainees who had followed him into the dome stole the video and uploaded it truly infuriated him. That someone who was supposed to be in favor of slaying All Might would turn against him in that way was the height of shame. Scrubbing once again in the hopes that the stench would eventually disappear, he said, oh that one dies too. Kurogiri gave him another can of tomato juice, and Tamura launched into another insane tirade about destroying the person who released the video, All Might, and that shape-shifting bastard. Her left arm hung down over him, her left leg draped over his, and her head rested on his chest. Momo grinned. Izuku held her firmly against and on top of him, his right arm slung over her shoulders. Without telling him that she had entirely given up underpants, she had once again taken a pair of his pajamas. She was a little restless tonight, but she had hoped to get to sleep as fast as he did. She stared up at him, her mind racing with indecent ideas. She understood why such thoughts made her feel so proud to be a woman. 6U ally, she was aroused. She wanted to know if they were prepared for it yet. She did love him, so it was difficult not to think about it. In a sense, she wanted to do it merely to demonstrate her love for him and his love for her. She was concerned, though, that they might not be prepared to do it just yet. She had previously been told by pals she had known since kindergarten that they had lately had 6 and that it wasn't a huge issue. Even still, they were suddenly more worried about what to wear to school than anything else. Although it was possible, she did not want 6 to alter their relationship. After having 6, one or both of them may conclude that their relationship is no longer viable. Although Momo wasn't sure Izuku would believe it, it was still a worry. She kept asking herself if it was time or not. As Momo drew him in, Izuku muttered wearily, you should be sleeping. That is what you stayed the night for, wasn't it? Not wanting Inko to overhear them, Momo whispered back to him, yes, I was just thinking. Izuku whispered, what are you thinking about? As Momo's cheeks started to flush. Momo said, if and when, that we have 6. Izuku tensed up, staring down at her with a startled look on his face. Izuku said, what? A bit loudly than he meant to. To make sure he didn't wake his mother, he looked toward the door. 6 Izuku, I was thinking that eventually I would like to have 6. I am not saying tonight or even soon. But we both know that at some point we both will want to have 6. It is all part of being in a romantic, loving and caring relationship with someone. Momo whispered to clarify why she was up. Izuku pretended to be annoyed as he muttered, "Great, now I can't sleep." Momo nodded and slowly stood up, saying, "So I suppose we should talk about this. Let's go out on the balcony so that my mother never hears us talking about this." Izuku joined her, and the two of them headed out onto the balcony to chat. When Izuku leaned back against the outer wall, the crisp, cool night air finally awakened him up enough to focus completely. Hearing that Momo was considering having sex with him soon was a little shocking. She had explained things to him, but he had largely missed them. He immediately concentrated on what she had said after waking up. Izuku asked, "Are you saying that you love me?" Momo winced. "I want to know something first. You said, it is all part of being in a romantic, loving and caring relationship with someone. I remember that, especially for a brief moment there, I was too shocked to fully understand that, but now I do." She had assumed he would forget what she had said. She nodded while swallowing and looking down at the tiny 10-foot balcony's floor. Momo yelled, "Yes, I love you." Happy now. Biting her lower lip. Then she turned to face him. She could see his enormous smile even though the light was too dim for her to see him well. Holding her close to him, he gathered her into his arms. She glared at him and protested, "Say something, you moron." He grinned and gave a small laugh. "Well, I am waiting." She became irate and rather suspicious, concerned that his feelings for her were not the same. "So do you love me too or what?" She threatened to hurl him over the balcony if he didn't respond right away. "Of course I love you, Momo. I have loved you back when we first went to the zoo together. Why do you think it hurt me so badly when you told me you hated me? In my mind I knew you were having a hard time due to, well, you know. But when you said you hated me, it broke my heart." Izuku replied and Momo pressed her lips against her husband's, bringing him closer to her. Yes, she might have had sex with him at that very time. However, none of them was quite prepared to do so just yet. Particularly because his mother is prepared to catch them doing it. No, they would have to hold off until the ideal moment arrived. As she pressed herself against him and felt her hips move back and forth against his pelvis, she thought that, but her body was not thinking that. She said softly, "It would be so easy." Momo said again, "So easy." Momo put her palm on his chest and stepped back a few steps, declaring, "We have to stop." Izuku gazed at her bewildered. She was essentially pushing him away after they had shared so many kisses like that. Why? He wondered. In the hopes that he would understand, she muttered, "We have to, or I won't have the willpower to not have sex right now." Taking ragged breaths in and out, Momo said, her heart thumping in her chest, "With you telling me you love me and that I love you, I could so easily want to do it." Izuku completely understood. Momo nodded and gulped when Izuku remarked, "Then we better get back in bed. I suspect my mother will be checking on us soon." Momo saw his curious expression and said firmly, "You go ahead. I need to take a shower first." As she went to the bathroom in the hopes of lowering her hormones and desire, she added, "A very cold shower." Izuku laid down and took out a couple sheets of tissue from the box on his nightstand, knowing it would take her a few minutes. His own desire was now tent-poling from his pajama trousers, and he was aware of how Momo felt. He had to manually sat his cravings by reaching down. Given her desire to do so and the fact that she was only in the bathroom nude, it didn't take long. In 2 minutes, he finished his duty with ease. With a sigh of relief, he leaned back and tossed the used tissues in the garbage. Since he first met and began dating Momo, he had to do this multiple times. Otherwise, he might roll over by accident, which could be very painful. Standing beneath the chilly water in the restroom, Momo sputtered, wondering if other ladies experienced the same emotions when they were romantically involved. They probably did, she bet. Fortunately, her burning arousal was being cooled by the ice water. If not, she wouldn't mind if Inko discovered them. Yes, she really wanted to. However, the time was not yet right. She believed that her home would be the ideal location. There were plenty of locations where they could hide without fear of being discovered by her parents or captured on camera. She closed her eyes, ducked under the water one final time, and tried to think about something else but giving in and having sex. Nothing sprang to mind for a while. She sighed, at last feeling more in control of herself. She took a towel off, put the pajamas back on, and went back to bed with Izuku. Momo, Izuku, and Mina felt they were ready for the sports festival after the week flew by. Momo was grateful that her near loss of control had just occurred that one night. Izuku was incredibly sympathetic, which made it difficult for her to focus. Because it increased her love for him and her attraction to him. She leaned back on her bed and murmured, "Fucking hormones." The three of them had made the decision to skip training for the weekend because it was Friday night. Momo was tempted to sneak Izuku in after her parents had gone to bed in order to have him stay over. Then, thinking it would not be a good idea, they gave it another thought. Not the emotion she had. Momo and Izuku therefore just wandered around the grounds after Mina went. They agreed to meet up the following day. She let out a quick exhale and looked at her alarm clock. She was expected to arrive to Izuku's apartment in roughly 9 hours, but it was now close to midnight. She sat up, grabbed her phone, and started looking for a method to calm herself. Perhaps divert her attention from her true desires. She exhaled as she went through the list, stopping on something she would never have thought of: exercise. No. Drink warm milk. Yuck. Count sheep. Like that ever works. Watch TV. Nothing on this late at night. Something too abnormal, it seemed. She hovered her finger over the idea. She tapped her lower lip while biting it. Sighing, I watched the brief film. Oh, what the hell. She watched the video again, paying great attention to the woman's actions. She put the phone down, lowered her fighting hand, and placed her fingers into her pajama shorts between her legs. She was a little hesitant about making a mistake. She was pleasantly pleased and touched herself. Yes, that felt good. She closed her eyes and focused on the emotions for a short while. She moaned softly as her muscles tensed up. With a deeper sigh, she knew that something was going to happen, so she pulled her hand against her. She sighed in satisfaction. She grinned, leaned back, and took her hand away. Momo muttered, "Feeling much better, so that is what it feels like to masturbate." She wasn't sure if she would do that again. She hoped that she wouldn't have to because eventually it wouldn't be required. She felt more at ease than before, and after a little while, she dozed off with a slight grin of satisfaction. Momo woke up feeling just as satisfied and turned to see the clock. Going to the bathroom to get ready was shortly after 7 in the morning. She was energized. She contemplated whether to style her hair the conventional way while gazing into the mirror. To get it to stand up the way she wanted it to, it took around 20 minutes and half a bottle of hair gel. She chose to ignore it and proceed as is. She reflected on how easily she had fallen in love with Izuku and vice versa while brushing. Indeed, it had been over 2 months, but she was astounded by how quickly it had passed. There was always someone in the movies who fell in love with someone else and said it was love at first sight. That was never really her opinion. After meeting someone, it was nearly hard to develop an emotional attachment to them. However, it is what actually occurred. After spotting and hearing him in the park behind the tree, she liked him right away. She quickly came to truly like him and concluded that he was the one she wanted. Alternatively, it might just be her teenage hormones going into overdrive. In any case, she didn't give a damn at this time. She loved Izuku Midoriya and he was significant to her. All that mattered was that she chose to forego breakfast and have it at his, skipping down the stairs. She also liked his mother. He was still able to detect the odor after a week. Tamura Shigaroki tried to remove it, but he winced. He no longer tasted it in his mouth, at least. At least that was something. Kurogiri said that he truly no longer smelled it and that it might be psychological. Despite his want to believe it, he was unable to do so. The worst thing that had happened was the embarrassment. More than 5 million people had viewed the fucking video of him getting sprayed. Favored by those who now make fun of him. He had been informed by his master that it would eventually be forgotten and that it would inspire others to join them. The people he wanted to join snickered at him and cited the video. So far, that hadn't been the case. Although Tamura needed them, he had been inclined to kill them for bringing it up. Tamura said mainly to himself, "All Might needs to die, but not as much as that fucking kid." Kurogiri had located the person who had uploaded the video and was working to make him face the consequences. Tamura was a little pleased by this, and he scrubbed himself nearly raw once more, fighting valiantly to rid himself of the odor. An hour later, he dressed and went to wait for Kurogiri. The shadow then materialized, casting a man in front of Tamura. Tamura smiled savagely and said, "Well, if it is not, Hunji Tororanki, otherwise known as Whipper, welcome to the League of Villains headquarters." The older man shook as he gazed up into Tamura Shigaroki's red insane eyes. Hunji stumbled out, "Listen, I'm sorry, I never thought it would be so popular." He forced the fear from his throat. He never thought Tamura would discover him. He and a few others managed to avoid capture following the events at the dome. He wished now that he hadn't. Leaning down, the younger man gazed at him. Tamura said, his smile gone, "Oh, so you admit posting that video of me being humiliated?" He up and slapped Hunji across the temple in anger, saying, "You made me look like a total fool. For that I should have had Kurigiri kill you in the quickest way possible. You fucking jackass, do you know now no one takes me serious? Without respect I am nothing more than a joke," he yelled. Yes, he intended to murder Hunji, but it would be as agonizing as possible. Additionally, it would be videotaped and uploaded. As a result, it would be known that you die after making him look foolish. Snatching the other man's arm just above the elbow, he reached below, putting all 5 fingers on him. Hunji looked at him curiously at first, and then a few seconds later. His eyes grew wide with anguish and terror. As Hunji started to scream, Tamura said, grinning broadly, "Kurigiri, start the recording." Hunji hoped it was over when his arm came loose at the elbow. Tamura then put his second arm in a clasp. Bellows of misery were interspersed with Hunji's plea, "Please. No more. Please, I am begging you." He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to ignore the discomfort. Shut off the stench of rotting flesh that seemed to rise into his nostrils. His left arm fell to the ground, and he heard another thump. Hunji stumbled back, unable to move. He was barely able to breathe due to the extreme pain and agony. As Tamura put his palm on his right knee, tears streamed down his face. He started to pray that it would end. Tamura grinned widely and grabbed Hunji by the throat. Hunji was dead in a matter of seconds, and his head had now joined the body heap on the ground. He took a step back and started laughing uncontrollably. Kurigiri shook his shadowy head over his shirt and tie as Tamura gave him the order, "Post that on YouTube, oh add a little text that I plan on doing this to that shapeshifting little bastard and all might." Kurigiri made the suggestion, "That might not be a good idea. If you do plan on killing that kid, it might not be a good idea to advertise it." Tamura had to concur. Tamuro had no intention of endangering himself, and if the heroes knew, they might begin to defend the little bastard. Kurigiri was aware that his youthful ally was essentially a coward. Tamura Shigaraki avoided getting into any kind of risky situations unless he had the upper hand. Tamura said as she made her way back to the restroom, "Yes, that would be stupid. All right, just post it as is. Let those who mock me see what happens to them if they think they can humiliate me." He needed to scrub it off since he could still smell it. Momo left her house, but her mother stopped her for a while. Ashimomo's mother led her into the adjacent den and shut the door, asking, "Momo, can I talk to you for a minute? I wanted you to know if you want to spend the night at the Midoriya's, you do not need to ask permission. Also if you want to bring him here for the same reason then you can." Momo looked at her mother with disbelief. Her mother's right hand was raised. She paused, looked back at the door, then back at her, and said, "Now I am not granting you permission to." She said, "To have 6. Far from it, I just believe you are old enough to make your own choices. Now we are not going to tell your father about this. I doubt he could handle it." She laughed. Momo was unable to stop staring at her mother in disbelief. She snapped out of her reverie when her mother opened the door again. When Momo eventually said, "Thank you Mom," her mother gave her a big smile. As she led her out the door, Ashimomo remarked, "I like Izuku, he is good to you and I suspect he would do anything for you." As she shut the door after Momo, she continued, "Get going or you are going to be late." For a brief while, Momo stood outside, unable to comprehend that her mother was allowing her to either stay at Izuku's or bring him here to stay with her overnight. However, her mother was not allowing them to play around. That would be over the line, she guessed. She was eager to tell Izuku and his mother, Inko, as she got into the chauffeur-driven vehicle, deciding that spending the evening with her boyfriend would be enjoyable. She was a little concerned that she would experience the same issue once more. They had not yet reached the appropriate moment to take action. On the Sunday morning, Momo gave Izuku a closer embrace. Both discussed Monday and the sports festival till the wee hours of the morning. Regretfully, they were unable to plan for everything. As far as they were aware, the winners of first, second, and third place would be decided by 3 events. The issue was that nobody was aware of what had happened. Any one of the 23 occurrences that may be chosen at random could be one of them. For the participants, the festival was primarily an opportunity to demonstrate their flexibility in a variety of situations. The door to his mother's room was closed. If Izuku and Momo were about to have sex, Inko Midoriya had realized it. She could do very little to stop them. As she shut the door the previous evening, she had whispered to herself, "Teenagers will find a way." She spoke with Izuku and ensured that he had a condom box. When she gave him the box, he was a little humiliated, but he vowed to utilize them. She was essentially limited to that. She was relieved that the two did not appear to have given in to their desires yet when she got out of bed in the morning. She made her way to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast. The inaugural event is the sports festival. Izuku felt butterflies in his stomach as he waited with the others. Midnight declared that there would be a race at the event. He started thinking about the animals he would utilize. He could not just fly the distance as one of the birds he could utilize, according to the restrictions. Therefore, it was necessary to choose people who were able to sprint around the arena with endurance and stamina. Like a cheetah, a raptor was only effective over short distances. He chose a horse, a Morgan to be exact, and smiled wryly. They were the kind that could cover roughly 12 miles at a good pace. However, he would be prepared to consider additional options in case of any unforeseen circumstances. He didn't think it would be a straightforward race. Izuku managed to elude the huge track robots at a good horse-full gallop. His issue was that he was now exhausted. He had to proceed to an easy gait. It made it possible for Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki to overtake him. Izuku managed to catch up by transforming into a rabbit. He changed to a chimpanzee at the next obstacle and crossed to the opposite side hand over hand. Katsuki and Shoto were now well ahead. Izuku gasped for air and switched back to human form to take a little break. Crap, I overdid it with the robots. He could not stay when he turned to see others coming. He changed into a greyhound dog and proceeded, knowing that he had to finish third at the very least. He needed to prove himself, and the entire festival was about doing just that. At the race's last obstacle, he hesitated, attempting to come up with something that would get across the minefield without triggering any of them. The decision was simple because the terrain was sandy. Now a diamond-back rattlesnake, he slithered over the plain without setting off any of the mines. However, Shoto and Katsuki were well ahead of him, and the pace was slow. He looked through the complete list he had access to and asked, "What is light enough not to set off the mines, but fast enough to get across quicker?" He flinched. He detested changing into any kind of spider or insect. The main reason for this was that he detested creepy crawlies. He swallowed his disgust and transformed into a camel spider. He could now move more quickly without setting off the mines. Using his many eyes, he could see that Katsuki and Shoto were both close to the finish line at the edge of the field. He shivered as he transformed into his human form. He closed his eyes and uttered the words, "Yuck, yuck, yuck." He was trying to forget what it felt like to be something so repulsive to him. Now that he was able to think clearly, he got back into the Greyhound and sprinted to third place, with Shoto in second place and Katsuki Bakugo in first. He moved to one side and waited in the hopes that Momo would arrive, which she carried out covertly on her back while Minoru Mineta was present. Izuku was able to rest for a moment, leaning against a wall nearby. The idea of becoming into that spider was still bothering him. Momo joined him after spotting him standing to one side, looking worriedly at him. He flashed her a half-smile when she questioned, "Are you all right?" Izuku, who was still not fond of the feeling, answered, "No, not really. I had to change into a camel spider." Momo shook her head and grinned. She was well aware of Izuku's aversion of insects, particularly spiders. In order for him to combine various insects into something useful, she nearly had to make him visit an entomology lab, making him handle the various spider and insect varieties. Momo boastfully remarked, "Told you they would come in handy." She had to giggle when she saw his reaction. She hated to make fun of him in that way, but he needed to focus on the sports festival rather than his discomfort at being transformed into a simple, repulsive, ugly spider. "Oh come on Izuku, you know I hate snakes but I do not turn into a wuss when you do change into one. So it should be the same for you." Izuku firmly said, "I am never doing that again. I wish there was a way to take the insects and spiders away from him." Thus far, it appeared that there was no upper limit and that there was no way to get rid of any of them. Momo took his hand and squeezed it reassuringly, saying, "Well come on. They are about to announce the next event." She then let it go before anyone could notice, and they strolled together to await Midnight's announcement of the next event. The chariot race. Izuku joined him, followed by Mina, with Momo by his side. The three started thinking about who else they could invite to join their group. He had already chosen the ideal animal for the occasion. To make sure they did win, they only needed one more now. Katsuki said, Deku, from one side. Approaching Momo and him. He said, I am not asking you. I am telling you, I am going to be on your team. Izuku gaped at the explosive Quirker. Still in shock, Izuku looked to Momo and Mina to make sure he had understood Katsuki right before asking, wait, you want to be on our team, Kachan? Both females nodded and stared with wide eyes. Yes, you idiot. Look, Deku, you probably have an idea on what beast to use in this. I suspect it is one that will make it almost impossible for anyone to get too close. With the acid chick and me to drive them away from your ass. That leaves your girl there to sit on you and keep the headband safe, while trying to grab one of the others. Katsuki made a firm statement. Katsuki gave Momo a stern look before nodding. Would this have to do with that your band is worth a lot of points since you came in first? Momo inquired. Katsuki grinned and turned back to face Izuku. Yes, it does. Now I am not going to lose, so get it through your heads, I am joining your team. He inquired, more like a demand, so what animal are you going to change into, Deku? Izuku leaned forward and put his palms on the arena floor, grinning slightly. Having a long tail for balance and drastically increasing in size. In fact, it only took a few seconds, and a life-size Triceratops was immediately in front of them. Katsuki fixed his gaze on the horned dinosaur Izuku. Fucking awesome, he chuckled briefly. With a low grunt, Izuku muttered, Momo, it's your turn. Momo approached the dinosaur, which was roughly the size of an elephant, and started to circle it, with a noticeable sigh. She started making some required additions. One is to prevent Katsuki and Mina from sliding off. They attached the two seats immediately behind his rear legs with assistance. She fashioned a saddle to sit on top of him as she walked toward the front. The three mounted at this point. As he tried several seating arrangements, Katsuki reiterated, this is fucking awesome. He was fully capable of defending the side against anyone attempting to approach it. Mina, on the other hand, possessed the same talent. In a low, grunting voice, Izuku informed them, one problem I need to make you all aware of. In this form I am not that fast. I can probably run about 2 miles per hour for short distances. Katsuki yelled, who cares, you are a fucking tank right now, Deku. Let's kick some serious ass.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.